The Eternal Crusade, a chronicle of the Black Templars. In the dying embers of the 31st millennium, when the ashes of betrayal still smoldered across a shattered imperium, a new chapter was born, not in triumph, but in the aftermath of humanity's darkest hour. The Horus heresy had torn the galaxy asunder, leaving the Emperor of mankind entombed upon the Golden Throne, his dream of unity lying in ruins. Among the loyal sons who stood vigil over this broken empire was Rogal Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, a warrior whose stoic resolve had become both shield and burden in the wake of his father's fall. The second founding emerged not as a celebration of victory, but as a grim necessity imposed upon a traumatized imperium. The remaining loyal Space Marine legions, those vast armies of transhuman warriors who had conquered the stars in the Emperor's name, now represented a potential threat to the very stability they had sworn to protect. Too much power concentrated in too few hands. This was the lesson written in blood across the battlefields of the Civil War. Robout Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and architect of the post-heresy Imperium, proposed a solution through his great work, the Codex Astartes. The mighty legions would be divided into smaller chapters, each containing no more than 1,000 battle brothers, ensuring that never again could a single military commander wield sufficient force to threaten the Imperium itself. Rogal Dorn, that unyielding son of the Emperor, initially resisted this dissolution with every fiber of his being. The Imperial Fists had bled profusely in defense of Terra during the siege, their numbers already catastrophically diminished. To further divide them seemed not merely impractical, but a profound insult to their sacrifice, a denial of the price they had paid in blood and gene seed to preserve humanity's last hope. For a time, dangerous tensions simmered between Dorn and Guilliman, threatening to escalate into the very conflict they sought to prevent. Two Primarchs, both loyal beyond question, stood on opposite sides of a philosophical chasm that might have torn the Imperium apart before it could even begin to heal. Eventually, however, Dorn's legendary pragmatism overcame his pride and grief. He recognized the terrible wisdom in Guilliman's proposal, understanding that the prevention of another heresy justified even this painful reorganization. The Imperial Fists Legion would be split, though Dorn would ensure his mark remained indelible upon the process. From the divisions of his legion would come numerous successor chapters, each carrying forward different aspects of his legacy, different interpretations of duty and war. At Dorn's side throughout the long nightmare of the heresy had stood first Captain Sigismund, a warrior whose reputation transcended even the extraordinary standards of the Legion's Astartes. His skill with a blade had become the stuff of legend during the Great Crusade, but it was during the Siege of Terra that Sigismund truly ascended into myth. Taking up the mantle of Emperor's champion, he had sworn binding oaths and engaged in ritualized single combat against the most fearsome champions the traitor legions could field. His blade had tasted the blood of countless enemies, including several of Abaddon's chosen warriors who had thought themselves invincible. Sigismund had transformed from a mere space marine captain into something greater, a living icon of retribution, the Emperor's judgment made manifest in ceramite and steel. When the time arrived to divide the Legion, Dorn made a decision whose echoes would reverberate through 10,000 years of history. He summoned Sigismund to his chambers within the partially reconstructed Imperial Palace, that labyrinthine fortress still bearing the scars of traitor bombardment. The exact words exchanged between Primarch and First Captain were never recorded for posterity, perhaps deliberately so, but the substance of Dorn's directive became clear through subsequent actions. While most successor chapters would claim specific territories to defend or particular functions to fulfill, Sigismund's chapter would embrace something far more ambitious and unforgiving: perpetual crusade. They would wage eternal war against the enemies of mankind, knowing neither peace nor rest while a single foe of the Emperor drew breath. This directive carried with it a certain irony that could not have escaped either warrior. Sigismund, despite his unquestioned loyalty during the heresy, had fallen from Dorn's favor in the years preceding that terrible conflict. The first captain had been profoundly influenced by the words of Euphrates Keeler, one of the very first imperial saints, who preached faith in the emperor as a divine being rather than merely humanity's greatest leader. This religious fervor stood in direct opposition to the imperial truth that the emperor himself had established, the rational, secular ph philosophy that explicitly rejected religious worship and superstition. Dorn, ever the pragmatist and devoted to his father's original vision, had been deeply disappointed by Sigismund's embrace of what he viewed as dangerous mysticism. Yet in the aftermath of the heresy, with the emperor now sustained by the Golden Throne and already worshipped by many across the Imperium as a god, Dorn's perspective shifted with characteristic tactical flexibility. The secular certainties of the Great Crusade had died screaming on the walls of Terra. Faith, whatever Dorn's personal reservations, had proven itself a unifying force capable of sustaining humanity through its darkest hour. Sigismund's zealous temperament, once a source of concern, now represented an invaluable asset. A crusading chapter would channel that spiritual fervor outward against the Imperium's enemies, transforming religious devotion into a weapon of war. Sigismund accepted his new role with the same unwavering determination that had defined his entire service. The chapter he would lead adopted black armor, adorned with white crosses and crusader iconography, a stark, deliberate departure from the bold yellow livery of the imperial fists. This somber coloration served multiple purposes. It represented mourning for the fallen emperor, grievously wounded and unable to guide humanity as he once had. It symbolized their role as executioners of the emperor's judgment, death incarnate to all who opposed his will, and it marked them as fundamentally different from their progenitor chapter, a new brotherhood forged in the fires of humanity's greatest crisis. They named themselves the Black Templars, embodying both sorrow for what was lost and righteous wrath against those responsible for that loss. From their very inception, the Black Templars diverged significantly from the organizational structure prescribed in the Codex Astartes. While Guilliman's tome called for 10 companies of roughly 100 Marines each, with the first company composed of veterans and the 10th of neophyte scouts receiving their initial training, Sigismund organized his chapter around an entirely different principle: the Crusade. Each Crusade force operated with considerable autonomy, led by a marshal who answered directly to High Marshal Sigismund himself. This flexible structure allowed the chapter to prosecute multiple campaigns simultaneously across vast distances of space, responding to threats as they emerged rather than being constrained by rigid organizational boundaries. The size of each Crusade force varied dramatically according to its specific mission and the scale of opposition it faced. Some comprised small strike forces of merely a few dozen Marines, surgical instruments deployed against specific high-value targets. Others grew into massive armies numbering in the hundreds, overwhelming their enemies through the sheer weight of transhuman fury. This fluid organization made it extraordinarily difficult for imperial administrators to track the chapter's exact numbers at any given time. While officially adhering to the 1,000 Marine limit prescribed by the Codex, the Black Templars' distributed nature and continuous recruitment across multiple worlds allowed them to grow considerably larger over time, a fact that authorities grateful for their battlefield prowess conveniently chose to overlook. Training methods within the chapter also represented a significant departure from Codex norms. Rather than maintaining a dedicated scout company, where neophytes learned their craft in a structured environment before receiving full-power armor and implants, the Black Templars paired initiates directly with full battle brothers in a relationship reminiscent of medieval knighthood. Each neophyte served as a squire to an experienced Marine, learning through direct observation and participation in actual combat rather than simulated exercises. This practice reinforced the chapter's distinctive character, while ensuring that combat skills and spiritual devotion were transmitted directly from warrior to warrior, an unbroken chain of tradition stretching back to Sigismund himself. The spiritual practices of the Black Templars represented perhaps their most significant departure from Guilliman's prescriptions, where the Codex advocated a stoic, disciplined approach to warfare grounded in tactical doctrine and calculated risk assessment. The Black Templars embraced religious fervor as both weapon and shield. They deliberately chose not to maintain a librarius, viewing psychic powers with deep suspicion bordering on outright hostility. Instead of channeling the warp through sanctioned psychers, they directed their spiritual energy into combat rituals, binding oaths of moments sworn before each engagement, and battlefield litanies invoking the Emperor's protection and guidance. The position of Emperor's Champion, first held by Sigismund during the Siege of Tara, became institutionalized with in their structure. Before major battles, a brother experiencing visions would be selected to bear the sacred black sword and seek out enemy champions for ritualized single combat. These divergences from the Codex were not mere rebelliousness or stubborn independence for its own sake. They reflected the specific mission Dorn had entrusted to Sigismund, to wage eternal war against the enemies of mankind across the breadth of the galaxy. A crusading chapter required flexibility that rigid adherence to standardized structures might fatally compromise. They needed independence of action to respond to emerging threats without waiting for higher authority to issue orders. And they required spiritual fortitude to sustain them through endless warfare without rest, without the comfort of a home world to defend or a defined territory to call their own. Dorn, pragmatic as ever, recognized that different weapons served different purposes. The Black Templars would be the blade eternally unsheathed, the judgment that never ceased, the crusade that would continue until either the last enemy fell or the last Templar died in service to the Golden Throne. The gene seed inherited directly from Rogel Dorn shaped the Black Templars as profoundly as Sigismund's leadership and spiritual vision. Throughout the Imperium, the Sons of Dorn are known for their exceptional stubbornness, a trait that manifests not as mere obstinacy, but as an absolute refusal to deviate from a chosen course once committed. This characteristic runs through all Dorn's descendants like an unbreakable thread woven into their genetic fabric. In the Black Templars, this stubbornness expresses itself as an adamant refusal to retreat unless strategically absolutely necessary. Where other chapters might conduct tactical withdrawals to fight another day, preserving their strength for future engagements, the Black Templars frequently press attacks against overwhelming odds, trusting in their skill, their faith, and the Emperor's favor to carry them through even the most desperate circumstances. This genetic stubbornness extends beyond tactical decisions into matters of belief and doctrine. Once the chapter fully embraced faith in the Emperor as a divine being, no argument or evidence could dissuade them from this conviction. While the ecclesiarchy's doctrines evolved over the millennia, adapting to political necessities and changing circumstances, the Black Templars maintained their own interpretation of the imperial creed with unwavering certainty. Their faith, forged in the crucible of the heresy's aftermath and tempered by 10,000 years of continuous warfare, has become as unyielding as the ceramite plate that protects them. From Dorn, the Black Templars also inherited an obsessive attention to detail in preparation for war. Before any engagement, each Marine meticulously inspects his war gear with almost ritualistic precision, rehearses tactical plans until they become instinctive reflex, and contemplates his duty in the context of the chapter's broader mission. The chapter's armorers and artificers are renowned throughout the Adeptus Astartes for their exceptional skill, maintaining ancient weapons and armor with reverent care that borders on worship. This perfectionism extends to their ships and fortifications as well, though unlike their progenitor chapter, the Black Templars channel this tendency toward mobile assets rather than permanent defensive positions. They maintain no fortress monastery on a single world. instead making their home among the stars aboard massive battle barges and strike cruisers. The Primarch's legendary skill in defensive warfare translated somewhat paradoxically into the Black Templars' offensive expertise. Understanding the fundamental principles of fortification, fields of fire, structural weak points, supply lines, and defensive psychology allows them to identify and ruthlessly exploit weaknesses in enemy defenses with surgical precision. Where Dorn excelled at creating impregnable positions that could withstand any assault, his Black Templar descendants specialize in breaching such fortifications, applying the same fundamental knowledge toward the opposite purpose. They see not walls to build, but walls to tear down, not defenses to establish, but defenses to overcome. Perhaps most significantly, the Black Templars inherited Dorn's uncompromising loyalty, that absolute, unshakable dedication to duty that defined the Primarch throughout his long service. Dorn had been the Emperor's Praetorian, personally responsible for defending Terra itself, the throne world of humanity. Even after the Emperor's internment in the Golden Throne, when many might have despaired or questioned their purpose, Dorn remained steadfast in his duty, never wavering despite the crushing weight of responsibility and loss. The Black Templars channel this loyalty into religious devotion, transforming the Primarch's secular dedication into spiritual commitment. But its essential character remains unchanged. Absolute commitment to duty regardless of personal cost, unwavering service until death claims them or the Emperor's enemies are vanquished entirely. This combination of genetic stubbornness, meticulous preparation, tactical flexibility within strategic constancy, and unwavering loyalty made the Black Templars ideally suited for their role as perpetual crusaders. Where other chapters might grow weary of endless war, questioning the purpose of their campaigns or seeking respite between major operations, the Black Templars prosecute their eternal mission with the same fervent zeal in the 42nd millennium as they did in the 31st. For them, war is not merely duty or profession. It is sacred calling, divine purpose, the very reason for their existence. In the early years following their founding, Sigismund established practices and traditions that would define the chapter for millennia to come. He instituted the Feast of Blades, a ritual combat tournament demonstrating both the chapter's martial focus and its continued connection to the Imperial Fist's heritage. He established the position of Reclusiarch as central to the chapter's structure, ensuring that spiritual leadership would guide Black Templar crusades alongside tactical command. Most importantly, he set the chapter irrevocably upon its endless path of war, declaring in words that have been repeated by every high marshal since. The Black Templars would know no peace, while enemies of the Emperor still drew breath anywhere in the galaxy. The first Black Templar crusade launched from Terra itself, with Sigismund leading his warriors against remnants of the traitor legion still lurking within the Sol system like infection festering in a wound. This initial campaign established the chapter's reputation for relentless pursuit of their enemies. Where the Imperial Fists had been known for stoic defense and immovable determination, the Black Templars quickly gained renown for aggressive shock assaults and exceptional skill in close-quarters combat. Their warriors sought not merely to defeat enemies, but to bring them to judgment, to personally deliver the Emperor's wrath upon those who had betrayed his trust. As the crusade pushed outward from Terra into the broader Imperium, the chapter established its first fortress monastery aboard a massive vessel christened the Eternal Crusader. This choice perfectly reflected their nature and purpose. Unlike other chapters who claimed worlds as their domains, building great fortresses where they would recruit, train, and prepare for war, the Black Templars would make their home among the stars themselves. Forever mobile, always moving toward the next battle, their fortress monastery served as both headquarters and symbol, a mobile cathedral of war from which Sigismund could direct multiple crusades across the fragmented post-heresy Imperium. As the newly formed Black Templars departed Terra in their strike cruisers, The galaxy they faced had become a broken reflection of what it once was. The Imperium lay fractured and bleeding, with countless worlds cut off by warp storms or fallen to enemies both ancient and new. Communication networks that had bound the Imperium together during the Great Crusade had collapsed under the strain of civil war. Supply lines lay severed, leaving entire sectors to fend for themselves. The dream of unity that had driven the Emperor's Great Crusade seemed all but extinguished, replaced by an age of desperate survival and isolated struggle. Yet it was precisely in this darkness that Sigismund's purpose burned with its brightest intensity. The first High Marshal understood with terrible clarity that the traitor legions, though defeated at Terra and driven back into the Eye of Terror, had not been destroyed. They had scattered across the stars like seeds of corruption, many retreating into that hellish realm where reality itself bent to the will of the dark gods. But others remained hidden throughout imperial space, nursing their hatred in the shadows, plotting revenge against the civilization that had rejected them. These remnants posed a dire threat to an already weakened Imperium, and Sigismund vowed with every fiber of his being that they would find no respite, no sanctuary, no moment of peace while he still drew breath. In the year 814 of the 31st millennium, less than a century after the heresy's conclusion, Sigismund launched what imperial scholars would later designate the First Templar Crusade. The Black Templars themselves, characteristically, simply saw it as the beginning of an endless campaign that would continue until either victory or extinction. Their initial targets were not the distant strongholds of chaos deep within the Eye of Terror. Those would require centuries of preparation to assault directly. Instead, Sigismund focused on the hidden enclaves of traitors within what should have been secure imperial territory, cancerous cells that must be excised before they could metastasize into something far worse. Intelligence gathered by imperial agents and inquisitorial operatives identified several star systems in the Segmentum Solar, where word-bearers and Alpha Legion elements had established footholds during the confusion of the heresy's aftermath. These insidious traitors had spent the intervening years spreading their poisonous ideology and corrupting once loyal populations. The Black Templars struck at Lastrate with the sudden fury of a thunderbolt. Their fleet emerged from the warp without warning, catching the defenders completely unprepared for such a swift and decisive response. The word-bearers' warband that had corrupted this once loyal mining colony had spent years transforming the principal hive city into a twisted monument to their dark gods, its architecture warped into blasphemous shapes that hurt the eye to behold. They had fortified their position extensively, preparing for the day when imperial authorities might discover their presence. What they had not prepared for was the righteous fury that Sigismund brought to bear upon them. The assault began with precision bombardment from orbit, lance strikes and mass reactive shells methodically crippling the traitors' void defenses. Before the enemy could recover from this devastating opening salvo, drop pods began to rain from the heavens like falling stars of judgment. The Black Templars deployed directly into the heart of enemy territory, bypassing outer defenses entirely to strike at the corruption source. Sigismund himself led the vanguard, the black sword gleaming in his hands as he carved a bloody path through ceramite and flesh with equal devastating ease. Survivors of this engagement, those few who lived to be interrogated by inquisitorial authorities, described the High Marshal as fighting with cold, calculated precision rather than blind rage or fury. Each strike was measured, each movement economical and efficient, yet executed with such supernatural speed that few could follow his blade with the naked eye. This was not berserker rage or battle fury, but something far more terrifying: absolute mastery combined with unwavering purpose, judgment delivered with mechanical inevitability. The traitors died not in the heat of passionate combat, but under the cold weight of justice long delayed. Before this battle, Sigismund gathered his warriors in the strike cruiser's chapel and instituted what would become one of the chapter's most defining traditions, the taking of oaths of moment. Each battle brother knelt before the reclusiarch, placing his hand upon the Book of Judgments, and swore to accomplish specific deeds in the coming conflict. Some vowed to be the first to breach enemy lines, testing their courage against the enemy's strongest defenses. Others swore to slay a specific number of foes, dedicating each kill to the Emperor's glory. Still, others pledged to recover sacred relics that the traitors had defiled, returning them to proper veneration. These were not merely personal goals or individual ambitions, but solemn vows made before the Emperor himself. Failure to fulfill them would require penance proportional to the oath's gravity. The tradition served multiple crucial purposes beyond simple motivation. It focused each warrior's mind on specific, achievable objectives, rather than being overwhelmed by the Crusade's impossibly vast scope. It fostered a spirit of controlled competition that drove battle brothers to greater feats of valor while maintaining unit cohesion. Perhaps most importantly, it reinforced the spiritual dimension of their warfare. These warriors were not merely soldiers fighting for territory or resources. They were knights fulfilling sacred oaths, crusaders bringing divine judgment to the damned. After cleansing Lastrate with purifying fire and Bol Tround, the Black Templars moved methodically through nearby systems, rooting out corruption wherever their augurs and intelligence networks detected its presence. These early campaigns established tactical patterns that would characterize the chapter for 10,000 years to come. Rather than relying on elaborate strategic deception or complex multi-phase maneuvers, the Black Templars favored direct assault against identified enemy strongpoints. Their doctrine emphasized shock, momentum, and close-quarters combat, with extensive use of drop pods and teleportation technology to bypass enemy defenses entirely and strike directly at command centers and leadership elements. This approach was not born of tactical simplicity or lack of sophistication, as some critics suggested. Rather, it reflected a deep understanding of their own capabilities and how to maximize them. The Black Templars excelled in close combat above all else, their training emphasizing blade work and martial skill to a degree that surpassed even other Space Marine chapters. By forcing engagement on these terms, they maximized their advantages while denying enemies the opportunity to employ massed ranged firepower or execute strategic withdrawals. They turned every battle into the kind of fight they were born to win. The early Crusade fleets were relatively modest in size compared to what the chapter would later command. The flagship Eternal Crusader served as mobile headquarters from which Sigismund directed operations, supported by a handful of strike cruisers and numerous smaller escort vessels. Each ship functioned as both transport and mobile base, carrying not only the warriors themselves, but also their extensive support staff, armorers, artificers, servitors, and the chapter serfs who maintained the vessels and equipment. These ships became homes in a way that no planetary fortress ever could, sanctuaries moving through the void between battles. This naval organization reflected a fundamental shift in how the chapter operated compared to their Legion forebears, where the Imperial Fists had maintained massive fortress monasteries on key worlds, permanent installations demonstrating their commitment to defense. The Black Templars established a network of chapter keeps, smaller fortifications serving as recruitment centers, supply depots, and staging areas for Crusade forces. These keeps were never intended as permanent homes where the chapter would gather as a whole. They were way stations supporting the Eternal Campaign, places to draw new blood and resupply before returning to the endless crusade. The first such keep was established on Rox, a frontier world near the edge of the Segmentum Solar. The fortress was constructed not according to standard Imperial templates with their emphasis on functional efficiency, but rather in the style of ancient Terran castles, high walls of native stone, imposing towers offering clear fields of fire, and extensive underground chambers providing secure storage and shelter. At its heart stood a chapel dedicated to the Emperor, its walls inscribed with the names of battle brothers who had fallen in the Crusade thus far, a memorial that would grow to cover every available surface over the following centuries. Similar keeps would be established on dozens of worlds over the following millennia, each maintaining a small permanent garrison, while the chapter's main strength remained eternally mobile. This distributed structure solved several critical practical problems. It allowed the Black Templars to recruit from a wide range of worlds rather than relying on a single source of aspirants, ensuring genetic and cultural diversity within their ranks. It provided logistical support across vast distances, enabling Crusade fleets to replenish supplies without returning to a central location. Perhaps most importantly, it made the chapter exceptionally difficult to track or target. There was no single fortress whose fall would cripple their operations, no central base that enemies could assault to deal a devastating blow. The Black Templars were everywhere and nowhere, a threat that could not be pinned down or eliminated through conventional strategic thinking. By 819, 5 years into their crusade, the Black Templars had expanded operations beyond the Segmentum Solar. Reports of significant Alpha Legion presence in the Helios cluster prompted Sigismund to make a momentous decision. He dispatched a crusade force under Marshal Bohemond, comprising 300 battle brothers with supporting elements, to prosecute this distant campaign. This marked a crucial development in the chapter's evolving structure. For the first time, a major campaign would be conducted without the High Marshal's direct oversight. Bohemond's Crusade, as it came to be known throughout the chapter's records, demonstrated the effectiveness of their decentralized command structure under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Operating independently for over a decade, frequently cut off from communication with Sigismund due to warp conditions, this force cleansed 7 major systems of traitor influence while establishing 3 new chapter keeps to consolidate their gains. Marshal Bohemond maintained communication with the High Marshal when possible, but warp storms often prevented regular contact for years at a time. In such circumstances, he relied upon the chapter's core principles and his own judgment rather than waiting for specific orders that might never arrive. This autonomy was made possible by the Black Templars' exceptional spiritual cohesion. Unlike chapters that depended on rigid chains of command and precise tactical doctrines, the Black Templars were united by shared faith and purpose that transcended formal organizational structures. A marshal could be trusted to make decisions aligned with the chapter's ethos, because that ethos had been internalized at the deepest level through years of spiritual training and combat alongside his brothers. Each Black Templar arrived within himself not merely training and skills, but the living tradition of the chapter, the accumulated wisdom of generations of warriors who had walked this path before him. This characteristic would prove invaluable as the Crusade expanded across the stars, with dozens of separate forces operating simultaneously by the end of the 1st century. Each pursued its own campaigns, yet all remained unified in purpose and method, all working toward the same ultimate goal: the eradication of the Emperor's enemies and the fulfillment of their founder's vision. The Black Templars' religious practices during this formative early period were still evolving, developing their own distinct character that would eventually set them apart from both the secular traditions of most Space Marine chapters and the increasingly formalized doctrines of the emerging imperial cult. Sigismund had been profoundly influenced by the teachings of Euphrates Keeler even before the heresy reached its apocalyptic conclusion, embracing the radical belief that the Emperor was not merely humanity's greatest leader, but its divine protector, a god in truth if not in name. This perspective had been deeply controversial during the Great Crusade, when the imperial truth explicitly rejected all religious worship as primitive superstition. But in the heresy's aftermath, with the Emperor now sustained by the Golden Throne and already worshipped by many throughout the Imperium as a deity, such faith found increasingly fertile ground. The chapter's devotional practices were fundamentally martial in nature, focusing on the emperor as the ultimate warrior rather than a distant, abstract deity. They venerated him through deeds rather than mere words, understanding that action spoke louder than any prayer. Each enemy slain became an offering laid at the foot of the golden throne. Each world reclaimed represented an act of worship more meaningful than any ceremony. Their battle litanies emphasized themes of judgment, retribution, and purification, with frequent references to fire and the sword as instruments of the emperor's divine will made manifest. Notably, the Black Templars developed these practices independently of the ecclesiarchy, which was still taking its first tentative steps toward institutional formation. While the official imperial creed was being hammered out on Terra through political compromise and theological debate, often more concerned with power structures than genuine faith, the Black Templars forged their beliefs in the crucible of endless war. This independence would occasionally create tensions with imperial religious authorities in later millennia, but during the Crusade's early period, such conflicts were minimal. The Imperium had far more pressing concerns than theological orthodoxy, and the Black Templars' loyalty and effectiveness spoke louder than any doctrinal disputes. The chapter's categorical rejection of psychic abilities also took firm root during these formative years. Unlike many of their cousin chapters, the Black Templars maintained no librarius, viewing psychic powers with deep suspicion that bordered on outright hostility. This stance was not merely doctrinal preference, but emerged from practical concerns grounded in bitter experience. The tumultuous state of the warp following the heresy made psychic manifestations particularly dangerous, with the barrier between reality and the immaterium stretched thin in countless locations. Several early encounters with traitor psykers reinforced this caution, as the Black Templars witnessed firsthand how such powers could serve as conduits for demonic influence, gateways through which the horrors of the warp could reach into reality. Instead of cultivating psychic warfare capabilities, the chapter developed extensive anti-psyker tactics and equipment. They crafted specialized gear for neutralizing enemy psykers, including null-field generators that could temporarily disrupt psychic connections. They trained in mental techniques designed to resist psychic assault, fortifying their minds through prayer and meditation rather than through psychic shields. Most importantly, they emphasized the rapid identification and elimination of such threats on the battlefield, recognizing that the best defense against a psyker was a bolt round to the skull before they could manifest their powers. This approach would prove highly effective against many foes throughout the chapter's history, though it occasionally placed them at a disadvantage when facing enemies with overwhelming psychic capabilities. The Black Templars accepted this limitation as the price of maintaining their spiritual purity, trusting that faith and steel would prove sufficient against any threat. By the year 830, barely 30 years into their independent existence, the Black Templars had established a presence in all 5 segmentums, with major Crusade forces operating in regions as distant as the Eastern Fringe and the Halo Stars. Their numbers had grown significantly through aggressive recruitment across multiple worlds, with some estimates suggesting they commanded nearly 3,000 battle brothers, well beyond the 1,000 Marine limit prescribed by the Codex Astartes. This expansion was not the result of deliberate defiance or calculated rebellion against Guilliman's strictures. Rather, it emerged naturally from their distributed structure and continuous combat operations. Each Crusade fleet recruited and trained neophytes as operational needs demanded, inducting them directly into their ranks rather than sending them to a centralized training facility. With dozens of such forces operating independently across the galaxy, and no centralized administrative body meticulously tracking total chapter strength, the Black Templars simply grew organically to meet the demands placed upon them. Imperial authorities, when they noticed this discrepancy at all, generally chose to overlook it with pragmatic wisdom. The Imperium desperately needed every warrior it could muster, and the Black Templars' loyalty remained beyond question. Why hamstring one of humanity's most effective weapons over bureaucratic technicalities? Sigismund himself remained at the forefront of the chapter's most challenging engagements throughout these formative decades, despite his already considerable age. He had been among the very first Space Marines created during the Unification Wars on Terra, making him one of the oldest living Astartes in the entire Imperium. Yet the High Marshal showed no signs of slowing, no diminishment of his legendary capabilities. If anything, his skills seemed to sharpen with time, his blade work becoming ever more precise, his tactical acumen more refined with each passing campaign. Those who fought alongside him spoke of his unwavering focus with something approaching religious awe, as though nothing existed for him beyond the next battle, the next enemy to be brought to judgment, the next oath to be fulfilled. The Black Templars stand fundamentally apart from their fellow Adeptus Astartes, distinguished not merely by their zealous devotion, but by the very structure through which they wage their eternal war. While most Space Marine chapters rigidly adhere to the organizational principles laid out in the Codex Astartes, 10 companies of roughly 100 warriors each, organized according to specific battlefield roles, the Black Templars maintain a fluid, crusade-based hierarchy that better serves their unique mission. At the apex of this structure stands the High Marshal, successor to Sigismund and supreme commander of all Black Templar forces scattered across the galaxy. The High Marshal bears the immense responsibility of determining the chapter's strategic direction, identifying which threats warrant the formation of new crusades, and allocating resources between existing campaigns. He also serves as the chapter's representative in dealings with other imperial authorities, though such diplomatic functions typically receive minimal attention compared to his primary martial duties. The High Marshal must be not merely a skilled warrior, but a strategic visionary capable of seeing the broader pattern of galactic warfare, while maintaining the spiritual focus that defines the chapter. Below the High Marshal serve the Marshals, each commanding an independent crusade fleet. The number of active Marshals varies according to the chapter's needs and the threats facing the Imperium, typically ranging between 10 and 20 at any given time. Each Marshal operates with considerable autonomy, often separated from his peers by thousands of light years and communication that can be disrupted for months or even years by warp storms. A Marshal must possess not only exceptional combat skills and tactical judgment, but also administrative capability, spiritual leadership, and the wisdom to make strategic decisions without higher guidance. He is responsible for recruitment, supply logistics, and maintaining the spiritual well-being of his forces, essentially functioning as a chapter master in all but name, governing his crusade fleet as an independent brotherhood united with the broader chapter through shared faith and purpose. Serving directly under each Marshal are several Castellans, officers roughly equivalent to company captains in Codex-compliant chapters. Castellans typically command forces of 50 to 100 battle brothers, often specialized for particular battlefield roles based on their personal expertise and their warriors' capabilities. A crusade fleet might include a Castellan commanding a primarily mechanized force built around land raiders and predators, another leading a veteran close combat contingent of sword brethren, and a third overseeing drop pod and aerial assault operations. This specialization allows Marshals to deploy precisely tailored forces for each engagement, combining elements from different Castellan commands to create perfectly balanced strike forces. The most honored warriors within the chapter belong to the Sword Brethren, the Black Templars equivalent to a veteran first company. Unlike Codex chapters where veterans are consolidated under a single commander, the Sword Brethren are distributed throughout the Crusade fleets, serving as personal champions to Marshals and Castellans, leading specialized strike forces, and providing battlefield guidance to less experienced warriors. Entry into the Sword Brethren is earned through exceptional deeds in combat rather than through standard promotion procedures. Each candidate requires sponsorship from an existing sword brother and approval from a chaplain who can verify both their martial prowess and spiritual devotion. This ensures that only those who embody the chapter's ideals in both action and faith achieve this honored status. This crusade-based organization provides the Black Templars with exceptional flexibility impossible in more rigid structures. When intelligence reports indicate a significant emerging threat, the High Marshal can quickly establish a new crusade by drawing elements from existing forces and supplementing them with reserves from the Eternal Crusader or various chapter keeps. Conversely, when a crusade accomplishes its primary objectives, its forces can be redistributed to other campaigns rather than remaining idle or being assigned to garrison duties. The system creates a dynamic, constantly adapting military force capable of responding to threats across the entire galaxy simultaneously. The fluid nature of this structure makes it notoriously difficult for Imperial administrators to track the chapter's exact numbers, a situation the Black Templars do little to clarify. While officially maintaining adherence to the 1,000-warrior limit prescribed by the Codex Astartes, the chapter has operated at significantly greater strength throughout most of its history. Conservative estimates based on observed deployments and engagement reports place their typical fighting force at around 5,000 to 6,000 battle brothers, though during periods of intense conflict their numbers have swelled even higher. This numerical advantage is maintained through aggressive recruitment practices that would be impossible for chapters tied to a single home world. Unlike Codex-compliant chapters that draw aspirants primarily from one planet, carefully managing that world's gene pool to ensure consistent quality, the Black Templars recruit from worlds across their areas of operation. When a crusade fleet establishes itself in a new system, chaplains often visit local populations to identify potential candidates, seeking not only physical prowess, but also spiritual fervor and a predisposition toward righteous anger, qualities that align perfectly with the chapter's ethos. This distributed recruitment provides genetic and cultural diversity while ensuring a constant influx of new blood to replace the fallen and expand the chapter's strength. The Black Templars' divergence from Codex norms extends fundamentally to their approach to warfare, particularly their marked preference for close combat engagements. While all Space Marines receive extensive training in multiple forms of warfare, the Black Templars place special emphasis on blade work, hand-to-hand combat techniques, and short-range firefights. This preference is deeply embedded in their training regimens, their tactical doctrines, and even the composition of their armories, which maintain larger stocks of melee weapons than most chapters and include many ancient, revered specimens passed down through generations. The Power Sword represents the archetypal Black Templar weapon, perfectly symbolizing the chapter's knightly heritage and emphasis on precision in combat. Many veterans wield master-crafted examples that have been passed down through multiple generations of warriors, each bearer adding their own marks and modifications while maintaining the weapon's fundamental character. These ancient blades tell stories through their very existence. This notch from a duel with an orc warboss, that modification made by a legendary artificer 3 millennia past, these inscriptions added by a sword brother who fell defending a shrine world. For a sword brother, his power sword is more than a weapon. It represents a physical connection to the chapter's history and a symbol of his hard-earned status. Chainswords appear more commonly among the rank and file, valued for their brutal effectiveness against lightly armored opponents and their profound psychological impact. The distinctive roar of dozens of chain blades activating in unison has become a signature sound, heralding Black Templar assaults, a noise that strikes fear even into hardened enemies who have faced Space Marines before. The chapter's artificers have developed several unique patterns, including the heavy-toothed Templar pattern, that sacrifices some maneuverability for significantly increased cutting power, capable of tearing through even reinforced armor with sustained application. for engaging heavily armored opponents, enemy Terminators, Orc Meganobs, Greater Demons. Many Black Templars favor Thunder Hammers and Power Mauls. These devastating weapons channel powerful disruption fields through significant mass, allowing warriors to crush ceramite armor and shatter vehicle plating with each thunderous blow. The chapter maintains an unusually high number of these weapons compared to other chapters, particularly among assault squads designated for anti-armor operations. Their forged ships include specialized facilities for maintaining these complex weapons, staffed by tech priests who have studied under the chapter's master of the forge for decades, learning the subtle art of calibrating disruption field generators for optimal performance. Combat shields frequently accompany these melee weapons, providing warriors with mobile cover as they close with the enemy across killing grounds swept by hostile fire. Black Templar shield designs vary widely between Crusade fleets, with some favoring large rectangular storm shields offering maximum protection, while others prefer smaller, more maneuverable combat shields that allow for more aggressive fighting styles. Many shields bear religious iconography and inscribed oaths, transforming them from mere defensive tools into symbols of the chapter's faith. Mobile altars carried into battle, emblazoned with prayers that remind both bearer and enemy of whose judgment approaches. This emphasis on close combat weaponry fundamentally shapes Black Templar tactical doctrine, where other chapters might methodically reduce enemy forces through sustained ranged firepower before closing for the kill, minimizing their own casualties through superior technology and training. The Black Templars actively seek to minimize the ranged engagement phase. Their battle plans typically revolve around rapid deployment directly into enemy formations, using drop pods for insertion from orbit, teleportation for precision strikes against hardened targets, or fast transport vehicles racing across contested ground. Once positioned among their foes, they rely on shock, aggressive momentum, and superior close quarters fighting skills to overwhelm opponents before supporting fire can be effectively coordinated. This approach carries inherent risks that less skilled warriors would find suicidal. The approach phase, those crucial seconds or minutes when assault forces close the distance while exposed to enemy fire, represents the most vulnerable moment in any attack. The Black Templars mitigate these risks through rigorous training that begins in their earliest days as neophytes and continues throughout their service. Their armor often features additional reinforcement around vital areas. The neck seal, primary heart, and progenid glands receive extra layers of ceramite, sacrificing some mobility for increased survivability during the critical approach. Many warriors carry compact, high-output weapons like plasma pistols or hand flamers, specifically for clearing immediate threats during the final seconds before melee is joined. The chapter also makes extensive use of smoke grenades, blind grenades, and other obscurement devices that disrupt enemy targeting systems and create temporary windows of opportunity. A properly deployed smoke screen, combined with the Space Marine's superior auto-senses and tactical coordination, can allow an entire squad to cross open ground that should have been a killing field. Similarly, blind grenades that temporarily overload visual sensors give assault forces those precious few seconds needed to reach enemy positions before defenders can bring weapons to bear effectively. Central to maintaining both the chapter's unique organization and its distinctive combat doctrine are the chaplains, whose role within the Black Templars extends far beyond that of their counterparts in other chapters. Where Codex chaplains primarily serve as spiritual guides and keepers of tradition, important but ultimately supporting the tactical command structure, Black Templar chaplains function as theological authorities, combat instructors, and enforcers of zeal. They are not merely advisors but wielders of genuine power within the chapter's hierarchy, second only to marshals in their authority and influence. The senior-most chaplain within the chapter holds the rank of Reclusiarch, traditionally stationed aboard the Eternal Crusader alongside the High Marshal. The Reclusiarch oversees the spiritual direction of the entire chapter, interpreting omens and visions that might guide the faithful, adjudicating theological disputes between Crusade fleets that might otherwise fragment the chapter's unity, and preserving the core tenets of Black Templar faith against drift or corruption. He also serves as guardian of the chapter's sacred relics, maintaining artifacts dating back to Sigismund's time and fragments reportedly taken from the Emperor's own armor during the Siege of Tara, items of such spiritual significance that their mere presence is believed to inspire warriors and ward against the corruption of chaos. Each Crusade fleet includes at least one Master Chaplain who reports directly to the Marshal while maintaining a spiritual connection to the Reclusiarch, ensuring that individual fleets never drift too far from the chapter's core beliefs. These senior chaplains supervise the instruction of neophytes, ensuring that new recruits absorb not only combat techniques, but also the religious principles that separate Black Templars from mere warriors. They lead the most important rituals, including the taking of oaths before battle and the consecration of new crusades, when marshals split their forces or establish new campaigns. In councils of war, Master Chaplains provide spiritual perspective alongside tactical considerations, sometimes advocating for more aggressive action when strategic caution might otherwise prevail, reminding commanders that faith demands boldness, that the Emperor favors the zealous over the timid. Serving under these senior figures are numerous chaplains assigned to specific fighting units, warrior priests who move among the battle brothers before combat, leading them in prayers and battle hymns that prepare both mind and soul for the coming storm. During battle itself, they remain at the front lines where fighting is fiercest. Their distinctive skull-faced helms and black armor serve as rallying points amid the confusion of combat, while their litanies broadcast through vox amplifiers bolster morale and reinforce the religious significance of their struggle. When brothers fall, struck down by enemy fire or blade, it is the chaplains who recover their gene seed and progenitor glands with reverent precision, ensuring the chapter's future while honoring its past through proper rites of remembrance. Black Templar chaplains differ fundamentally from their counterparts in other chapters in their approach to the imperial truth, that secular philosophy the Emperor himself once championed. Where many Space Marine chaplains maintain the Emperor's original teaching that he was not divine, but merely the pinnacle of human evolution, the most perfect expression of humanity's potential, Black Templar chaplains embrace and propagate belief in the Emperor's true godhood. They teach that the Black Templars fight not merely for humanity's survival or the Imperium's preservation, but for the fulfillment of divine will made manifest through their deeds. Every battle becomes an act of worship, every victory confirmation of the Emperor's favor, every fallen brother a martyr whose sacrifice brings them closer to their God. This theological position occasionally creates tension with other imperial institutions, including some fellow Astartes chapters who view such overt religiosity as a betrayal of the Emperor's own teachings. But it provides the Black Templars with a sense of absolute purpose that sustains them through their endless crusade. There is no ambiguity, no room for doubt or existential questioning. They know with absolute certainty why they fight, who they serve, and what awaits them beyond death. This unwavering conviction makes them exceptionally resistant to the corruption of chaos, as those who already possess absolute faith cannot be tempted by false promises or seduced by whispered lies. Perhaps the most distinctive aspect of the Black Templars organization is their approach to training neophytes, those aspirants who have passed the initial trials and received the first of their gene seed implants, but have not yet become full battle brothers. While Codex-compliant chapters maintain dedicated scout companies, where initiates learn battlefield skills in a structured training environment before receiving their full implants and power armor, the Black Templars integrate their neophytes directly into active combat units through the Crusader squad system. Each neophyte is paired with a full battle brother in a mentor-student relationship, reminiscent of medieval knighthood. the very tradition that inspired much of the chapter's character and identity. The initiate serves as a squire to his assigned marine, maintaining his equipment with meticulous care, observing his combat techniques in battle and training, and fighting alongside him when the Crusade fleet engages the enemy. This arrangement provides practical education under actual combat conditions rather than simulated exercises, while establishing personal bonds that strengthen the chapter's brotherhood beyond mere unit cohesion. Crusader squads typically comprise 5 to 10 such pairs, allowing initiates to benefit from the experience and wisdom of multiple veterans, while still receiving personalized instruction tailored to their individual strengths and weaknesses. The more experienced battle brothers share hard-won knowledge about different enemies, terrain types, and tactical situations, building the neophytes' understanding through accumulated experience rather than rote memorization of doctrine. The neophytes within these squads are easily identified by their partial armor, a visible marker of their incomplete status. They receive their ceramic plates piece by piece as they prove themselves worthy through combat performance and spiritual growth, with the chest plate and helmet typically being the final components granted only after they have demonstrated true readiness to become full battle brothers. Until they earn complete armor, they rely on carapace armor similar to that worn by Imperial Guard veterans, effective against most small arms but offering nowhere near the protection of full power armor. This vulnerability is entirely by design, reflecting the chapter's philosophy toward training and warrior development. The Black Templars believe that warriors who experience the full danger of combat before receiving all their enhancements develop proper respect for both their enemies and their own limitations. A neophyte who has felt lasgun rounds impact his carapace, who has seen brothers fall to wounds that power armor might have turned aside, learns caution without cowardice, aggression tempered by tactical wisdom. These young warriors are expected to show courage without recklessness, engaging appropriate targets while recognizing when to seek support from their more capable brothers. They learn that heroism and stupidity are separated by judgment, and that true service to the Emperor requires living to fight again, rather than dying gloriously but uselessly. This system of training produces warriors who are not merely skilled fighters, but true inheritors of the Black Templar tradition, men who understand that their service encompasses both martial excellence and spiritual devotion, who see no separation between their roles as warriors and as faithful servants of a divine emperor. By the time a neophyte receives his final pieces of armor and takes his place as a full battle brother, he has been shaped not just by instruction but by lived experience, forged in the same fires that made his mentors and countless generations before them. He carries forward not just skills and techniques, but the living spirit of the chapter itself. The Black Templars' devotion to the Emperor transcends mere loyalty or duty. It represents a profound theological conviction that sets them fundamentally apart from most other Space Marine chapters. Where others maintain the secular traditions of the Great Crusade era, viewing the Emperor as humanity's greatest leader and the pinnacle of human achievement but not divine, the Black Templars have embraced his godhood with absolute conviction since their founding. This theological position predates the establishment of the ecclesiarchy by several centuries, making the chapter among the earliest organized proponents of what would eventually crystallize into the Imperial Creed. Sigismund's spiritual transformation began during the latter years of the Great Crusade, influenced profoundly by his interactions with Euphrates Keeler and other early devotees who experienced visions of the Emperor as a divine being worthy of worship. These individuals claim to have seen the Emperor not as a man, however extraordinary, but as something transcendent, a god walking among mortals, concealing his true nature out of wisdom rather than deception. Though Rogel Dorn disapproved deeply of his first captain's religious leanings, considering them contrary to the imperial truth and potentially dangerous precedent, Sigismund's faith only deepened during the horror of the Horus heresy. The sight of traitor Astartes corrupted by chaos convinced him with terrible clarity that humanity needed more than rational secularism to resist the dark powers lurking in the warp. Logic and reason had proven insufficient. After all, some of the most brilliant minds in the Imperium had fallen to chaos despite or perhaps because of their intellectual prowess. What humanity needed was faith, not blind faith, but faith tempered by action, made real through sacrifice and proven through deeds. When the Black Templars separated from the Imperial fists during the Second Founding, they carried this conviction with them like a sacred flame, incorporating religious elements into every aspect of their organization and identity. Their fortress monastery ships contained grand cathedrals where battle brothers gathered for worship, vast spaces dominated by statues of the emperor in various aspects: the warrior, the scholar, the judge. Their armor bore religious iconography largely absent from that of their parent chapter, aquilas prominently displayed, sacred seals affixed to joints and weapon casings, devotional script etched directly into ceramic. Even their battle cries evolved, shifting from plea statements of loyalty like "for the emperor" to invocations of divine protection and retribution. The emperor protects, his will be done, suffer not the guilty to live. This early veneration took forms that might seem primitive or unsophisticated compared to the elaborate rituals developed by the later ecclesiarchy, with its centuries of theological refinement. The Black Templars' worship emphasized action over contemplation, sacrifice over comfort, and direct communion with the emperor through battle meditation, rather than through intermediaries or complex ceremonial hierarchies. They believed, and continue to believe with unshakable certainty, that the emperor's attention is drawn to those who fight in his name, that he witnesses their deeds directly from his throne on Terra, and that he judges them accordingly. Every action, every decision, every moment of combat occurs under his divine gaze. Central to the chapter's religious practice is the taking of vows, those binding oaths sworn before each significant engagement. Before battle, warriors gather in the ship's chapel or an improvised field shrine to swear oaths of moment, specific promises regarding their conduct in the coming conflict. These are not standardized recitations repeated by rote, but personal commitments carefully tailored to each warrior's role, experience level, and spiritual development. A battle brother might vow to be the first to breach an enemy stronghold, testing his courage against the enemy's strongest defenses. Another might promise to protect a specific relic from desecration, placing sacred duty above personal survival. A veteran might swear to slay an enemy champion in single combat, seeking to prove his worth through direct confrontation. A neophyte might vow simply to stand firm and not retreat, demonstrating that his spirit matches his mentor's, despite his incomplete training. The ritual of oath-taking begins with purification, preparing both body and soul for the coming trial. Warriors fast for 24 hours before major engagements, consuming only water blessed by chaplains through prayers and sacred oils. During this fast, they meditate on their past failures and the oaths they have previously fulfilled, examining their conscience and steeling their resolve. They then undergo scouring, ritual flagellation that serves as both penance for past failures and preparation for the pain that surely awaits them in battle. The severity of this practice varies between Crusade fleets, with some limiting it to symbolic lashes, while others maintain the more intensive traditions of earlier millennia, drawing blood as an offering and a reminder that suffering purifies the spirit. Once purified through fast and scouring, the battle brothers kneel before their chaplain one by one to speak their vows aloud. Each warrior places his hand upon a sacred text, typically the Lectitio Divinitatis or the chapter's own book of judgments, while reciting his oath in his own words. The chaplain then marks the warrior's armor with purity seals, strips of parchment bearing prayers and promises affixed with wax impressed with the chapter's seal. These sacred documents contain both the warrior's personal vows and general prayers for protection and strength, words believed to carry genuine spiritual power. These purity seals serve multiple crucial purposes beyond mere symbolism. They visibly demonstrate that the battle brother has completed his pre-battle rituals, allowing commanders and chaplains to quickly identify those who are properly prepared. They remind the warrior himself of the promises he has made, each seal positioned where he can see it during combat, on his vambraces, shoulder plates, or thigh armor. Perhaps most importantly, they are believed to provide genuine spiritual protection, the prayers inscribed upon them forming a barrier against corrupting influences that might exploit moments of weakness or doubt. Whether through genuine divine intervention or simply through the psychological strength of absolute conviction, warriors bearing properly consecrated purity seals do seem to resist chaos corruption more effectively than those without such protections. The chapter's artificers have developed specialized variants of purity seals for different combat situations, each designed to address specific threats. Seals prepared for void warfare incorporate prayers against the soul-chilling emptiness of space and the terror of fighting in vacuum. Those created for battles against demons include specific wards derived from ancient texts, prayers that supposedly cause actual pain to entities of the war. Campaigns against Xenos warrant seals bearing prayers of purification to protect against alien contamination, whether biological, psychological, or spiritual. A veteran battle brother's armor might bear dozens of these seals accumulated over years or even decades of service, creating a visible record of his combat history and spiritual devotion. Complementing these purity seals are devotional scripts applied directly to the armor itself, permanent additions that transform each warrior's protection into something more than mere equipment. Black Templar plate is distinguished throughout the Imperium by extensive religious text inscribed across its surface, prayers taken from sacred works, verses from the Lectitio Divinitatis, names of honored ancestors invoked for guidance, and personal credos expressing each warrior's understanding of his duty. These inscriptions transform power armor into mobile shrines, surrounding warriors with words of power believed to strengthen resolve and shield the soul from corruption. The preparation of war gear extends far beyond these visible elements into elaborate blessing rituals performed before each battle. Power swords undergo a three-stage consecration designed to spiritually attune weapon and wielder. First, the blade is cleansed with sacred oils, removing any spiritual contamination from previous battles. Then it is exposed to incense while prayers are chanted over it, surrounding it with prayers made physical through smoke. Finally, it is anointed with a drop of the warrior's own blood, creating a spiritual bond between weapon and wielder that supposedly allows them to function as a single entity in combat. This attention to spiritual preparation reflects the chapter's fundamental belief that warfare against the enemies of mankind, particularly chaos forces, but also Xenos who serve as tools of the dark gods, whether they know it or not, occurs simultaneously on physical and metaphysical planes. A warrior whose mind and soul are properly fortified can resist corrupting influences that might otherwise exploit momentary weaknesses: fear, doubt, anger, pride. The Black Templars view these rituals not as primitive superstition, but as practical spiritual armor, as essential as their ceramite plate and as necessary as their weapons. Just as they would never enter battle without their bolters, they would never face the enemy without proper spiritual preparation. The chapter's religious practices extend beyond pre-battle preparation to shape their conduct during combat itself. Black Templars constantly recite litanies and prayers as they fight, their vox channels filled with overlapping devotional phrases creating a wall of sound. These are not merely expressions of faith or emotional comfort, but tactical tools with practical battlefield applications. The continuous prayer bolsters individual warriors' resolve during the most desperate moments, providing mental anchors when terror might otherwise overwhelm even transhuman courage. Against enemies sensitive to psychic emanations, demons, certain Xenos breeds, psyker-led forces, The combined prayers of an entire Crusade force can noticeably diminish warp manifestations in the immediate vicinity, creating zones of relative safety in real space. After battle comes the accounting, a solemn ritual as important as the oath-taking that preceded it. Warriors return to their ship's chapels to report on the fulfillment of their vows before chaplains who record each success and failure in the chapter's sacred annals. Those who succeeded in their sworn objectives receive new purity seals marking their accomplishment, honors to be displayed proudly on their armor. Those who failed, whether through their own shortcomings or through circumstances beyond their control, must undergo penance proportional to the gravity of their oath and the nature of their failure. Minor shortcomings might require additional prayer vigils or temporary fasting. More serious failures could demand extensive self-flagellation or assignment to high-risk missions, where the warrior can redeem himself through extraordinary service or noble death. This cycle of vow-taking, battle, and accounting creates a continuous spiritual discipline that shapes the chapter's very identity. Unlike some imperial organizations where religious observance occurs at scheduled intervals separate from regular duties, morning prayers, evening devotions, weekly services, the Black Templars' faith is woven inextricably into the fabric of their everyday existence. There is no distinction between their roles as warriors and as devotees, no separation between martial duty and spiritual service. Each aspect reinforces and completes the other, creating warriors who are simultaneously the most faithful servants of the Emperor and his most deadly instruments. The physical manifestations of this profound faith are perhaps most evident in the chapter's treatment of relics, sacred objects venerated not merely as historical artifacts, but as items possessing genuine spiritual power. The Black Templars maintain one of the most extensive collections of such artifacts in the entire Imperium, outside the ecclesiarchy itself. These relics range from weapons and armor fragments to actual body parts of fallen heroes, each preserved with reverent care and deploy. In battle for both practical and spiritual purposes. The most revered relics date back to the chapter's founding, particularly items associated with Sigismund himself. The original Black Sword, though lost during the High Marshal's final battle with Abaddon the Despoiler, served as the template for all subsequent versions carried by Emperor's champions throughout the millennia. Fragments of Sigismund's armor recovered after his death were incorporated into reliquaries that accompany major Crusade fleets, allowing his spiritual presence to guide his successors thousands of years after his physical death. Warriors pray before these reliquaries before battle, seeking wisdom and courage from the chapter's founder. The chapter maintains elaborate protocols for the recovery of potential relics from battlefields, ensuring that nothing of spiritual significance is lost or left to enemies. When a distinguished warrior falls, specialized chaplain assistants, sometimes called relic wardens, recover not only his gene seed for future generation, but also any body parts or equipment fragments that might serve as sacred objects. These items are carefully cataloged, blessed through appropriate ceremonies, and evaluated for their spiritual significance based on the fallen warrior's deeds, the manner of his death, and any visions or omens associated with him. The most powerful become campaign relics carried into battle to inspire the living through physical connection to heroic dead. Others are enshrined aboard Crusade ships or in chapter keeps, creating places of pilgrimage where battle brothers can pray and meditate. The Black Templars classify their relics according to a complex hierarchy based on age, association with significant events or individuals, and perceived spiritual power. Primary relics, those directly connected to the chapter's founders or to particularly significant victories that shaped the Imperium's history, are maintained aboard the Eternal Crusader under the Reclusiarch's direct supervision. Secondary relics, typically associated with notable marshals or significant crusades, are distributed among the Crusade fleets with careful records maintained of their whereabouts and custodianship. Tertiary relics, including fragments of weapons or armor from distinguished but less legendary warriors, are more widely distributed, often carried by sword brethren or veteran sergeants as personal talismans. Among the chapter's most unusual relics are their collection of skull relics, actual skulls of fallen heroes preserved through a combination of chemical treatments and sacred oils, maintained indefinitely as focal points for veneration. These are not merely displayed in shrines as objects of contemplation, but actively incorporated into battle equipment in ways that might seem macabre to outsiders. The helm of a particularly revered marshal might be modified to include bone fragments from his skull after death, creating what the chapter believes is a direct spiritual connection between the current wearer and his predecessor. Command vehicles sometimes include skull niches, where these relics can be placed during combat operations, allowing the wisdom and experience of the deceased to guide current commanders through their spiritual presence. The veneration of these relics reflects a fundamental theological belief in the persistence of the warrior spirit beyond physical death. The Black Templars hold that their fallen brothers continue to serve the Emperor in the Immaterium, fighting alongside him in realms beyond mortal comprehension. Physical remains provide anchor points through which this spiritual influence can extend back into the material realm, allowing the honored dead to continue contributing to the eternal crusade. This belief system predates similar ecclesiarchy doctrines regarding imperial saints, representing an independent theological development that would eventually become a central tenet of the broader imperial creed. The relationship between the Black Templars and the Adeptus Ministorum has evolved considerably over the millennia, shaped by both theological agreement and practical considerations. When the ecclesiarchy first emerged as an organized imperial institution in the 32nd millennium, the Black Templars viewed it with cautious interest. Here was an organization that shared their fundamental belief in the emperor's divinity, yet approached worship through elaborate ritual and hierarchical structures, rather than through direct combat service. Initial contacts between chapter chaplains and ecclesiarchy priests were characterized more by theological debate than immediate alliance. The Black Templars questioned the priest's emphasis on elaborate ceremony over martial action. What good were golden sanctuaries and hour-long masses when the emperor's enemies remained unpunished? The ecclesiarchy representatives, meanwhile, found the chapter's independent interpretations of divine will potentially problematic, worried that warriors who believed they received guidance directly from the emperor might not respect proper religious authority. Neither side rejected the other outright, recognizing shared core beliefs, but full integration of their belief systems proved impossible due to fundamentally different approaches to faith and service. Over time, a working relationship developed based on mutual respect and recognition of complementary roles. The Black Templars acknowledged the ecclesiarchy's importance in maintaining faith among the civilian population, billions of ordinary humans who needed guidance and structure that the chapter could never provide. The ecclesiarchy recognized the Black Templars' unique position as divine warriors whose direct service to the emperor transcended normal ecclesiastical hierarchy. They answered to the emperor himself rather than to any mortal authority. By the mid-33rd millennium, it was not uncommon for Black Templar Crusade fleets to include ministorum priests serving as advisors on local religious customs and as liaisons with planetary church authorities. This relationship was severely tested during the Age of Apostasy, when Goj Vander's corruption of the ecclesiarchy threatened the Imperium's stability. The Black Templars were among the very first Space Marine chapters to recognize the existential threat Vander represented, their independence from standard Imperial command structures allowing them to act decisively, while others hesitated or remained entangled in political considerations. Multiple Crusade fleets converged on worlds where Vander's loyalists were persecuting faithful populations, providing crucial military support to what would eventually become Sebastian Thor's Confederation of Light. The chapter's involvement in these conflicts was not motivated by political calculation or strategic advantage. Their chaplains studied Vander's pronouncements carefully and found them inconsistent with their understanding of the Emperor's will. The High Lord's teachings elevated himself rather than the Emperor, seeking personal power rather than serving divine purpose. This theological assessment, rather than strategic considerations, drove their decision to oppose his forces, demonstrating how faith rather than politics guided their choices. For the Black Templars, this was not rebellion against authority, but rather loyalty to a higher power, the Emperor himself standing in judgment over all mortal institutions. In the aftermath of the Age of Apostasy, the relationship between the chapter and the Reformed ecclesiarchy strengthened significantly. The decree passive, which prohibited the ecclesiarchy from maintaining men under arms, highlighted the unique position of the Adeptus Astartes as warriors outside direct ministorum control, yet deeply committed to the imperial faith. The Black Templars, already operating independently while maintaining fervent religious convictions, became an important example of how military might could serve faith without threatening church governance. Modern interactions between Black Templar chaplains and ecclesiarch priests typically occur in the context of Crusade operations. When a Crusade fleet enters a new system, local ministorum representatives are among the first imperial authorities contacted. They provide invaluable intelligence on the spiritual condition of the population, help identify potential recruits who possess the appropriate religious fervor, and assist in coordinating the chapter's efforts with local imperial forces. In return, the presence of Black Templar warriors often reinvigorates local faith dramatically. Planetary congregations swell after witnessing the chapter in action, seeing living proof that the Emperor truly protects those who serve him faithfully. Despite this cooperation, the Black Templars maintain theological independence, preserving interpretations of the imperial creed that sometimes differ from official ecclesiarchy positions. Their understanding emphasizes direct action over contemplation, personal combat skill over institutional hierarchy, immediate judgment over bureaucratic process. These differences occasionally create tension with more orthodox ecclesiarchy representatives who expect deference to their religious authority. But conflicts rarely escalate beyond theological debates, as both organizations recognize they serve the same divine master, even if they understand his will in somewhat different terms. The Black Templars' visual identity is as stark and uncompromising as their combat doctrine, instantly recognizable across the Imperium and beyond. Their primary heraldry, jet black armor adorned with white crosses and devotional script, distinguishes them immediately from their Imperial Fist's progenitors and serves as both warning and promise to their enemies. This distinctive appearance has remained remarkably consistent across 10 millennia, a visual testament to the chapter's unwavering dedication to their founding principles. When Sigismund established the Black Templars during the Second Founding, his choice of colors represented a deliberate and permanent break from the Imperial Fist's bold yellow livery. The black armor adopted by his warriors served multiple symbolic purposes that resonated with their identity and mission. Most immediately and obviously, it signified mourning for the Emperor, grievously wounded during the Siege of Tara and interred upon the Golden Throne. This somber coloration reminded each battle brother that the Imperium they fought to preserve was fundamentally broken, its divine leader unable to directly guide humanity as he had intended. They fought not for a triumphant civilization, but for a wounded realm, keeping vigil over an empire in perpetual crisis. Beyond this expression of grief, the black armor represented the chapter's role as executioners of the Emperor's judgment. In many human cultures throughout history, black has been associated with death, finality, the ending of all things, fitting symbolism for warriors dedicated to delivering the Emperor's justice to his enemies. The color's practical benefits in void warfare and night operations, allowing warriors to approach targets with minimal visual signature, aligned perfectly with the chapter's preference for shock assaults that struck without warning. The white Maltese cross that adorns Black Templar shoulder pauldrons, vehicles, and banners draws directly from ancient Terran military orders that fought religious wars during Old Earth's medieval period. This 8-pointed symbol represents the 8 virtues the chapter holds most sacred: loyalty, piety, courage, honor, faith, strength, judgment, and wrath. The stark contrast between the white cross and black background creates visual impact visible even amid the chaos of battle, allowing battle brothers to quickly identify allies and serving as a rallying point during complex engagements. The precise placement of this cross varies according to complex heraldic rules maintained by the chapter's marshals and chaplains. Standard battle brothers typically display the cross on their left shoulder pauldron, with the right reserved for squad or crusade markings. Veterans among the Sword Brethren often bear the cross on both shoulders, the dual symbols signifying their elite status and their embodiment of the chapter's ideals. The High Marshal's armor traditionally features a larger cross extending across the chest plate, marking him as the living embodiment of the chapter's virtues. The chapter symbol itself, a black Maltese cross on a white background, often encircled by devotional script, appears on banners, vehicles, and occasionally on specialized armor components. This inverted color scheme distinguishes official chapter iconography from the personal heraldry individual warriors display. When shown on campaign banners, this symbol is frequently augmented with gold edging and sacred seals, transforming it from mere identification into a sacred standard that inspires nearby battle brothers to greater feats of valor through both its symbolic meaning and believed spiritual power. Complementing these core symbols is an extensive vocabulary of secondary markings that communicate a warrior's status, achievements, and battlefield role with instant clarity. Perhaps most distinctive are the red crosses worn by the Sword Brethren and the Emperor's Champion. This crimson variation on the chapter's standard white cross symbolizes both the blood shed in the Emperor's service and the heightened responsibility these elite warriors bear. The red cross typically appears on both shoulder pauldrons or knee plates, positioned to be visible from multiple angles during combat. The Emperor's Champion, that singular honored warrior chosen through visions before major engagements, bears additional distinctive heraldry beyond the red cross. This warrior wears artificer armor extensively modified with devotional iconography, including sacred texts inscribed directly into the ceramite with micro-engraving tools, and golden aquilas positioned at key points across the armor's surface. The armor's helmet features a distinctive laurel wreath motif, marking the wearer as victorious even before battle commences, a visual declaration of absolute faith in the Emperor's support and inevitable triumph. This specialized heraldry serves crucial practical purposes beyond mere symbolism. In the confusion of close quarters combat with visibility obscured by smoke, debris, and the press of bodies, distinctive markings allow warriors to instantly identify command figures and specialized combat roles. The red crosses of Sword Brethren, visible even through the worst battlefield conditions, direct less experienced battle brothers toward these veteran fighters for guidance and support. Similarly, the Emperor's Champion's distinctive appearance ensures that all nearby warriors can locate and follow this inspirational figure during crucial engagements. Individual Crusade fleets within the chapter maintain their own heraldic traditions that complement these universal elements, creating rich diversity within unity. These variations typically appear on the right shoulder pauldron, where warriors display markings indicating their specific Crusade allegiance. The Eternal Crusade, the chapter's original and most prestigious campaign, uses a simple sword icon on a black field. The Dorn Crusade incorporates elements of the Imperial Fist's heraldry to honor the chapter's primogenitor. The Neovar Crusade employs a stylized flame motif, representing their focus on purging heretic worlds through cleansing fire. These Crusade markings evolve organically over time, incorporating elements that commemorate significant victories or honor fallen leaders. When Marshal Luty's fell during the cleansing of the Ghoul Stars, his crusade added a broken chain to their heraldry, symbolizing both his sacrifice and the liberation of human worlds he achieved before his death. Similarly, after the successful defense of Hellsreach during the Third War for Armageddon, Grimaldus's crusade incorporated hive spire imagery into their iconography, creating a visual record of this pivotal engagement that would be remembered for millennia. The right to bear these crusade markings must be earned through direct participation in the relevant campaign. When warriors transfer between crusade fleets, a relatively common practice as the chapter redistributes its strength according to evolving strategic needs, they must ceremonially remove previous crusade insignia and adopt those of their new command. Senior veterans who have served in multiple major campaigns spanning decades or centuries are sometimes granted the rare privilege of retaining elements from previous assignments, creating compound heraldry that records their extensive service history at a glance. Beyond these standardized organizational elements, individual Black Templars personalize their armor with campaign badges, small heraldic devices that commemorate participation in specific engagements. Unlike Crusade markings that indicate organizational affiliation and current assignment, these badges record personal history, creating visual autobiographies worn into battle. They typically appear on lower leg plates, belt accessories, or occasionally on specialized equipment like combat shields or weapon casings, where they won't interfere with armor articulation or combat effectiveness. The design of campaign badges follows historical precedent established during the Great Crusade era. Each major engagement receives a unique symbol designed by the Crusade's chaplains and artificers, incorporating elements that represent the campaign's nature and objectives. A badge commemorating void warfare might include stellar imagery or crossed swords over a void black field. One marking the defeat of orc forces typically incorporates broken axe or crushed skull motifs. Badges for campaigns against chaos often feature purifying flame symbols or broken 8-pointed stars. Warriors earn the right to display these badges through direct participation in relevant campaigns, with additional embellishments granted for exceptional service. A standard badge might be rendered in simple silver, marking basic participation. Warriors who performed heroically receive gold versions, their exceptional deeds recognized through precious metal. Those who suffered serious wounds while fulfilling their oaths can mark their sacrifice by edging the badge in red. Battle brothers who participated in the campaign's decisive engagement, the final assault that broke enemy resistance, may add laurel wreath surroundings to the basic design. Over a long service career spanning decades or even centuries, a veteran might accumulate dozens of these badges, creating a comprehensive visual record of his contributions to the Eternal Crusade. Rather than displaying all badges simultaneously, which would be impractical given their number and would obscure the armor itself, most warriors rotate which ones they wear according to the nature of their current assignment. When facing a recurring enemy, orcs encountered repeatedly across multiple sectors. For instance, they prominently display badges from previous successful campaigns against similar foes, both to intimidate opponents who might recognize the symbols and to demonstrate relevant experience to their battle brothers. The chapter's armorers maintain extensive records of these campaign badges, preserving templates and design specifications even for ancient campaigns concluded millennia ago. This allows them to produce replacement badges when originals are damaged in combat, and to create new versions for warriors joining ongoing campaigns midway through. Some of the most significant historical badges have been in continuous production for thousands of years, with subtle variations indicating the genera, tian or century in which they were awarded, creating stratified historical records visible to those who know what to look for. Personal heraldry among veterans represents the highest level of individual expression within the chapter's visual language. While standard battle brothers maintain relatively uniform appearances beyond their badges and basic markings, sword brethren and officers are not merely permitted, but expected to distinguish themselves through individualized elements. These typically include unique helmet designs, specialized shoulder pauldron embellishments, or distinctive weapon decorations that reflect each warrior's combat specialization and spiritual focus. The tradition of personal heraldry reaches its apex among the chapter's marshals, each of whom develops a unique visual identity that becomes inseparably associated with their leadership style and battle record. Marshal Helbrecht's distinctive winged helmet and gold-embellished armor components identify him instantly across even the most crowded and chaotic battlefields. Similarly, Chaplain Grimaldus's skull-faced helm adorned with additional bone elements and streaming parchment scriptures creates an unmistakable silhouette that both inspires allies and strikes terror into enemies. These personalized elements must conform to strict guidelines maintained by the chapter's chaplains, who ensure that individual expression remains within acceptable theological boundaries. All imagery must reflect approved devotional themes, explicit references to imperial saints, angelic figures from ancient Terran religions compatible with imperial doctrine, or symbolic representations of the emperor's various aspects. Warriors are absolutely prohibited from incorporating Xenos-influenced designs or imagery that might inadvertently reference chaos symbolism, with chaplains conducting regular inspections to enforce these restrictions and identify any problematic additions before they can cause spiritual contamination. The evolution of Black Templar iconography through 10 millennia reveals subtle shifts in emphasis while maintaining remarkable continuity in core elements. During the chapter's early centuries immediately following the Second Founding, their heraldry featured more direct references to their imperial fists heritage, with occasional yellow components complementing the dominant black and white scheme. As they established their independent identity over subsequent centuries, these references gradually diminished, though never disappeared entirely. Small imperial fist symbols sometimes still appear on veterans' honor badges or ceremonial equipment, acknowledging their origins while asserting their distinct identity. The 32nd millennium saw increased incorporation of skull imagery throughout the chapter's heraldry, coinciding with the rise of the imperial cult and its emphasis on martyrdom and death in service. Black Templar armor from this period often featured stylized human skulls representing both the mortality of individual warriors and the immortality of their collective service. This trend intensified during the Novadera Interregnum, when the chapter fought extensively against separatist forces and emphasized their role as loyal executioners of imperial will. Following the Age of Apostasy, the chapter's iconography incorporated more explicit religious elements, including additional scriptural passages inscribed directly onto armor surfaces and dramatically increased use of purity seals. This period also saw the introduction of red cloth components, tabards, loin cloths, and shoulder drapes that complemented the existing black and white scheme while adding visual references to the bloodshed accepted in the emperor's name. These additions made the chapter's appearance even more visually striking and immediately recognizable. The modern era has witnessed a synthesis of these historical elements, with different Crusade fleets drawing on various aspects of the chapter's heraldic tradition according to their commanders' preferences and the nature of their campaigns. Some maintain the austere black and white scheme with minimal embellishment, emphasizing the chapter's ancient origins and rejecting later additions as unnecessary. Others incorporate extensive scriptural elements and religious iconography, reflecting the intensified faith of the late 41st and early 42nd millennia. This diversity within unity characterizes the chapter's current visual identity, recognizably Black Templar regardless of specific Crusade affiliation, yet with distinct variations that reflect each force's particular history and focus. Regional variations within Crusade fleets have developed naturally as forces operate in different sectors for extended periods, sometimes decades or centuries without contact with the broader chapter. Black Templars crusading near the Eye of Terror often incorporate additional protective wards into their heraldry, including specialized hexagrammic designs developed in conjunction with Ordo Malleus Inquisitors who study demon-fighting techniques. Those operating in the Eastern Fringe frequently adopt more prominent Aquila imagery to emphasize imperial authority when dealing with isolated human worlds and Xenos-threatened colonies uncertain of their place in the broader Imperium. The practical application of Black Templar heraldry extends far beyond personal armor to encompass vehicles, spacecraft, and fortified strongholds. The chapter's tanks and transports maintain the black base color of their infantry armor, with white crosses positioned prominently on turrets, hull sides, and front glacis plates for instant identification. Additional Crusade markings typically appear on side panels, while campaign badges and kill markings, symbols denoting enemy vehicles or monsters destroyed, often adorn the vehicle's rear sections or less prominent surfaces. The chapter's strike cruisers and battle barges follow similar heraldic principles scaled up dramatically. Their massive black hulls bear enormous white crosses visible at void combat ranges, often illuminated by powerful external lights during combat approaches to maximize psychological impact. Vessels' prows frequently incorporate sculptural elements representing imperial saints or allegorical figures from chapter mythology. The Emperor Triumphant, Sigismund the Avenger, Dorn the Unbreakable. Weapon emplacements bear consecration markings visible only at close range, prayers etched into the armor surrounding lance batteries and torpedo tubes. Chapter keeps, those fortress monasteries maintained on various worlds throughout Imperial space, display the most elaborate expressions of Black Templar heraldry. These structures combine military functionality with religious symbolism in their very architecture, incorporating cross-shaped floor plans, skull motifs in decorative elements, and extensive use of black and white stone in their construction. The keep's central chapels feature massive, stained armor-glass windows depicting famous chapter victories, with specialized lighting systems ensuring these images remain visible even during defensive operations or nocturnal ceremonies. The Black Templars' distinctive heraldry thus serves as far more than mere decoration or identification. It functions as a visual expression of their core identity, instantly communicating their nature as warriors of faith to both allies and enemies. The stark contrast of black and white represents their uncompromising worldview, seeing only enemies to be destroyed and innocents to be protected with no gray areas in between. The Crusader imagery connects them to ancient Terran traditions of holy warfare, linking their eternal crusade to humanity's earliest struggles for survival and faith. In a galaxy where appearances often reveal deeper truths, the Black Templars present themselves exactly as they are, implacable, devoted, and eternally committed to the mission their founder set them upon 10,000 years ago. The final battle of High Marshal Sigismund remains one of the most storied and tragic confrontations in Imperial history, a duel whose outcome would resonate through 10 millennia. As the 31st millennium drew to a close, the Imperium faced its first organized assault from the forces that had retreated to the Eye of Terror 2 centuries earlier. Abaddon the Despoiler, once first captain of the Luna Wolves, now Warmaster of Chaos and champion of the Dark Gods, emerged from the warp leading a coalition of traitor legions, renegade Imperial forces, and demonic entities in what would later be designated the First Black Crusade. Imperial defense systems along the Cadian Gate, that crucial corridor between the Eye of Terror and the heart of the Imperium, detected the approaching Chaos fleet far too late to mount a properly coordinated response. Isolated battle groups engaged the invaders piecemeal, only to be overwhelmed by the concentrated might of Abaddon's forces. As news of these defeats reached Terra, High Marshal Sigismund made a decision that many questioned, but that perfectly exemplified his character. Though the Black Templars had Crusade fleets operating throughout the galaxy, he gathered only his personal guard, 100 veteran sword brethren, aboard the battle barge Eternal Crusader, and set course immediately for the Cadian sector. Many questioned this decision, arguing that Sigismund should have waited to assemble a larger force that might actually turn the tide of battle, rather than merely adding another 100 warriors to the desperate struggle. The High Marshal, however, understood something his critics did not, something his centuries of experience fighting traitor legions had taught him. When facing Chaos forces, time proved more valuable than numbers. Momentum was critical to Chaos operations. The initial shock, the spreading terror, the psychological impact of seemingly unstoppable advance. If Abaddon could be delayed even at terrible cost, even for days or weeks, the broader Imperial response would have time to mobilize, reinforcements could arrive, defensive positions could be fortified. The Eternal Crusader intercepted the Chaos fleet near the dying world of Sithonia, a planet already in its death throes from centuries of exploitation. Sigismund employed a daring strategy that leveraged his intimate knowledge of void warfare, using the planet's degrading orbit and debris fields as cover to approach Abaddon's flagship undetected. This was no mere battle barge, but the vengeful spirit itself, the massive battleship that had once been Horus's flagship, now corrupted beyond recognition into a vessel of nightmarish proportions. While the Eternal Crusader's guns engaged the vengeful spirit's escorts in a desperate void battle, Sigismund led a boarding action directly against Abaddon's command ship. The teleport assault, always dangerous even under ideal conditions, inserted the High Marshal and 40 sword brethren into the lower decks of the corrupted vessel. What they found there defied description: corridors that seemed to shift and writhe, walls that wept blood or whispered promises, gravity that functioned according to no natural law. This was no longer merely a ship, but a fragment of the warp-given physical form, reality itself twisted into shapes that hurt the mind to perceive. Fighting their way upward through this nightmare environment, through hordes of corrupted crew members, gibbering mutants, and Chaos Space Marines from multiple traitor legions, the Black Templars suffered heavy casualties. But they maintained their advance with mechanical inevitability, each fallen brother making way for those behind him. Sigismund fought with the same cold precision that had made him legendary during the Siege of Terra, that same economical perfection of movement. Each stroke of his blade ended an enemy's life with mathematical certainty. No wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish, just pure lethality refined over 1,000 years of continuous warfare. As the boarding party neared the ship's command deck deep in its heart, they encountered increasingly elite opposition. Veterans of the Black Legion, Abaddon's inner circle, warriors who had fought in the Horus heresy itself, formed a defensive perimeter around their master with fanatical determination. The Black Templars' numbers had dwindled to less than 20 by the time they breached this final defense, their armor rent and scorched, their weapons notched and bloodied. But Sigismund remained uninjured, his ancient armor bearing the marks of dozens of deflected blows, but his movement still fluid and precise. The confrontation between Sigismund and Abaddon took place in a vaulted chamber that had once been the vengeful spirit's stratagem. The despoiler had transformed this space into a shrine to the Chaos gods, with the ruined remains of imperial iconography providing a deliberately blasphemous backdrop to newly erected altars. Abaddon himself had changed dramatically from the proud first captain Sigismund had known during the Great Crusade. His armor had been modified with trophy racks bearing the skulls of loyalist champions, and the demonic sword Drachnian pulsed with malevolent sentience in his grip. What followed was not merely combat but a clash of symbols, meanings made physical through violence. The Emperor's champion of old facing the new War Master of Chaos, the embodiment of loyalty confronting the incarnation of betrayal. Witnesses among both the surviving Black Templars and watching Black Legion describe a duel of unprecedented intensity and skill. Though Sigismund was by then over 1,000 years old, ancient even by Space Marine standards, his movements showed no sign of deterioration or diminishment. If anything, his centuries of continuous warfare had refined his swordsmanship beyond what it had been even during the heresy, stripping away everything unnecessary until only perfect economy of motion remained. For nearly an hour they fought while their followers continued the broader battle throughout the ship, neither able to gain decisive advantage. Sigismund landed dozens of wounds on his opponent, his black sword finding gaps in Abaddon's Terminator plate that no ordinary warrior could have exploited, openings visible only to a master of the blade. Yet the despoiler, empowered by the ruinous powers and sustained by energies drawn from the warp itself, showed inhuman resilience. Wounds that should have killed even a space marine closed almost as quickly as they were inflicted, demonic vitality knitting flesh and bone back together. The end came not through any failure of skill or courage, but through the inevitable mathematics of attrition. Sigismund, for all his mastery, remained fundamentally mortal. As the duel extended beyond normal endurance, his reaction slowed by microseconds, imperceptible to human observers but sufficient for a warrior of Abaddon's caliber to exploit. The despoiler's counterattack drove Drachnian through Sigismund's armor at the joint between chest and abdomen, the demonic weapon bypassing ceramite to sever his spine with terrible finality. Even mortally wounded, Sigismund managed a final strike that carved a deep furrow across Abaddon's face, a scar the despoiler would bear for 10,000 years afterward as a permanent reminder of this confrontation. As life ebbed from the High Marshal, he spoke words that were recorded by the Vox pickup in his helmet and later recovered when his body was returned to the Imperium. The exact phrasing has been debated, but the substance was clear, a prophecy of Abaddon's ultimate fate. You will die as your weakling father died, soulless, honorless, weeping, ashamed. Abaddon's rage at these final words led him to commit an act intended as desecration, but which ensured Sigismund would be properly honored. He had the High Marshal's body impaled on the prow of the Eternal Crusader before allowing the crippled vessel to flee, displaying his trophy for all to see. This act, meant to demonstrate Chaos's triumph over the Emperor's servants, instead ensured that Sigismund's remains would be recovered and given the honors he deserved. More importantly, the delay caused by this confrontation disrupted the Chaos fleet's timetable just enough. The hours Abaddon spent dueling Sigismund and recovering from his wounds allowed Imperial reinforcements to reach the Cadian Gate and establish defensive positions. The First Black Crusade, though devastating, was ultimately contained before it could penetrate deeper into Imperial space toward the vulnerable heartlands of the Segmentum Solar. The recovery of Sigismund's body became a pivotal moment for the Black Templars, transforming grief into renewed purpose. His successor, High Marshal Bohemond, declared that the chapter would honor their founder through deeds rather than words, through action rather than mourning. Each subsequent High Marshal has renewed this commitment in his own way, ensuring that Sigismund's legacy continues to shape the chapter's identity even after 10,000 years. His death proved not an ending but a beginning, the moment when his teachings and example were permanently enshrined in the chapter's soul, when Sigismund the man became Sigismund, the eternal ideal toward which all Black Templars strive. As the 42nd millennium unfolds, and the Imperium faces threats that would have been unimaginable even a century ago, the Black Templars continue their eternal crusade with undiminished fervor. The great rift that split the galaxy has challenged them as it has challenged all imperial institutions, but their decentralized structure and spiritual cohesion have proven remarkably resilient. Crusade fleets isolated on either side of the Cicatrix Maledictum continue their campaigns, maintaining the Emperor's light in the darkness through faith and steel. High Marshal Helbrecht leads the chapter through these turbulent times with a combination of respect for tradition and willingness to adapt that echoes Sigismund himself. Under his guidance, the Black Templars have embraced the Primaris reinforcements while maintaining their distinctive combat doctrine and spiritual practices. They have developed new tactical approaches for emerging threats while preserving the aggressive close-quarters focus that has defined them since their founding. The eternal crusade that began in the aftermath of the Horus heresy thus continues into humanity's darkest hour, testament to the enduring power of faith, duty, and unwavering purpose. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Black Templars remain what they have always been, the Emperor's judgment made manifest, warriors of absolute conviction bringing his divine wrath to all who threaten humanity's survival. Their crusade knows no end, acknowledging no peace while enemies still draw breath. From the Eye of Terror to the Eastern Fringe, from the haunted depths of the Ghoul stars to the war-torn worlds of the Imperium Nihilus, black-armored warriors still take their oaths of moment before battle, still seek out the mightiest enemies for personal combat, still view their service as the highest form of worship. They are the sons of Dorn and the heirs of Sigismund, crusaders eternal, Templars unbroken, and they shall know no fear, no doubt, and no rest until the last enemy falls or the last Black Templar dies in service to the Golden Throne. The galaxy burns with 1,000 wars, each a testament to the eternal struggle between order and entropy, faith and corruption, humanity and everything that seeks its extinction. In this maelstrom of violence and despair, the Black Templars wage their endless crusade not as reluctant warriors forced into conflict, but as willing servants who have found their truest purpose in eternal war. For them, peace is not a goal to be achieved but a trap to be avoided, a spiritual death more terrible than any physical demise. They understand what many fail to grasp, that in a universe fundamentally hostile to human existence, vigilance and violence are not unfortunate necessities but sacred duties. The structure that supports this eternal crusade has evolved organically over 10 millennia, refined through countless campaigns against every conceivable enemy. Each crusade fleet operates as a self-contained military force, carrying within itself everything necessary to prosecute war indefinitely: warriors, equipment, supplies, spiritual guidance, and the institutional knowledge accumulated through generations of continuous combat. These fleets are not mere military formations, but mobile civilizations dedicated entirely to warfare, communities that know no other purpose than bringing the Emperor's judgment to his enemies. The logistics of maintaining such forces across the vast distances of the galaxy would overwhelm most organizations. Communication between Crusade fleets, already difficult under normal circumstances, became exponentially more challenging after the formation of the Great Rift. Traditional astropathic communication, never entirely reliable even in the best conditions, now frequently fails entirely across vast swathes of space. Yet the Black Templars have adapted to this challenge with characteristic pragmatism, developing multiple redundant systems that ensure critical information reaches its destination, even when conventional methods fail. The chapter maintains a network of astropathic relay stations aboard their numerous chapter keeps, creating multiple pathways through which messages can travel. If a direct transmission from one Crusade fleet to another fails, the message is routed through these relay stations, sometimes taking circuitous paths spanning thousands of light years and requiring weeks or months to reach its final destination. Patient and persistent, the chapter's communications specialists continue transmitting important messages repeatedly until confirmation of receipt is obtained, understanding that in the warp's chaotic currents, success often requires multiple attempts. More innovative are the data drone networks developed in cooperation with certain Adeptus Mechanicus Forge worlds. These autonomous spacecraft, heavily armored and equipped with powerful cogitator arrays, follow predetermined routes through real space, carrying encrypted tactical information between Crusade fleets operating in the same general region. Though far slower than astropathic communication when it functions properly, these drones provide reliable, if delayed, information transfer in areas where warp transmission proves impossible. The system has proven particularly valuable in the Imperium Nihilus, where the Astronomican's light does not reach, and conventional astropathic messages often fail entirely. Beyond these practical systems lies the spiritual cohesion that truly binds the chapter together across impossible distances. Every Black Templar, from the newest neophyte to the High Marshal himself, has internalized the same core principles, the same understanding of their purpose and methods. This shared foundation allows marshals separated by thousands of light years and years of communication lag to make decisions aligned with the chapter's broader strategy without requiring constant coordination. They think not as isolated commanders, but as members of a unified brotherhood pursuing the same eternal mission through parallel efforts. The recruitment practices that sustain the chapter across this vast operational area represent another aspect of their organizational genius. Unlike chapters bound to single worlds or systems, the Black Templars draw aspirants from hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. When a Crusade fleet liberates a world from enemy occupation or assists in its defense, chaplains evaluate the local population for potential recruits. They seek specific qualities beyond mere physical prowess: spiritual fervor, righteous anger directed at appropriate targets, unwavering loyalty, and willingness to sacrifice everything in service to a higher purpose. The selection process varies somewhat between Crusade fleets, each having developed their own traditions and trials suited to local conditions. Some employ elaborate tests of courage and endurance, sending aspirants into hostile wilderness to survive through their own resourcefulness. Others favor more direct assessments, placing candidates in simulated combat situations to evaluate both their fighting instinct and their ability to maintain composure under extreme stress. What remains consistent across all Crusade fleets is the emphasis on spiritual qualities alongside physical capabilities. The Black Templars would rather recruit a physically average candidate with exceptional faith than a physical specimen who lacks spiritual conviction. Once selected, aspirants undergo the grueling process of transformation into Space Marines, receiving the gene seed implants that will remake them into transhuman warriors. This process unfolds over several years as each new organ is implanted, allowed to integrate, and tested before the next is introduced. Throughout this transformation, the neophytes receive intensive spiritual indoctrination alongside their physical and tactical training. They memorize vast passages from sacred texts, learn the chapter's history and heroes, practice the prayers and rituals that will sustain them in battle, and most importantly, develop the absolute faith that defines a Black Templar. The gene seed itself, inherited directly from Rogel Dorn through unbroken chains stretching back to the Second Founding, shapes these young warriors in ways both obvious and subtle. The physical modifications are well documented: enhanced bone density, redundant organs, improved reflexes, accelerated healing. But the psychological effects prove equally significant. The stubbornness that characterizes all of Dorn's descendants manifests early, with neophytes displaying remarkable determination in completing assigned tasks regardless of difficulty. This trait, properly channeled through training and spiritual discipline, transforms into the unwavering resolve that allows Black Templars to press attacks others would consider hopeless. The integration of Primaris Marines into the chapter has added new dimensions to this ancient process. These enhanced warriors, created through techniques rediscovered by Archmago's call and authorized by Robot Guilliman himself, possess additional organs and modified gene seed that make them physically superior even to standard Space Marines. When they first began arriving at Black Templar Crusade fleets, some traditionalists viewed them with suspicion. Were these truly sons of Dorn, or something else wearing his genetic legacy? Would their different origins and training methods prove compatible with the chapter's unique culture? These concerns were addressed through characteristically direct methods. Chaplains subjected Primaris transfers to rigorous theological examination, testing not their genetic purity but their spiritual authenticity. Those who demonstrated appropriate faith and embraced the chapter's religious practices found acceptance regardless of their enhanced physiology. Those who maintained the more secular outlook common among Mars-trained Primaris were politely but firmly redirected to other Imperial Fist successor chapters, where their talents would be better utilized. This spiritual gatekeeping ensured that new warriors, whatever their physical specifications, shared the fundamental convictions that define a Black Templar. The results have exceeded even optimistic expectations. Primaris Black Templars have proven themselves in countless engagements, their enhanced capabilities allowing them to accomplish feats impossible for standard Astartes, while their adopted faith drives them forward with the same zealous fury as their firstborn brothers. The increased strength and resilience of Primaris physiology has proven particularly valuable in the brutal close-quarters combat the chapter favors, allowing warriors to survive wounds that would incapacitate even standard Space Marines, and to wield heavier weapons with greater ease. The tactical applications of Primaris equipment have opened new possibilities for chapter operations. Repulsor tanks, hovering on anti-gravitic fields rather than grinding forward on tracks, provide mobile fire platforms capable of keeping pace with advancing infantry across difficult terrain. Their ability to transport Primaris-sized warriors in full Gravis armor while providing supporting fire makes them ideal for the rapid assaults the chapter specializes in. Redemptor dreadnoughts, housing fallen heroes in sarcophagi connected to powerful weapon systems, offer devastating fire support while allowing honored dead to continue serving the chapter long after their bodies failed. Perhaps most significantly, the influx of Primaris reinforcements allowed the chapter to launch new Crusade fleets for the first time in several centuries. Marshal Urart's vengeance from beyond Crusade, comprised primarily of Primaris Marines with veteran firstborn officers providing leadership and institutional knowledge, focuses on reclaiming worlds in the Ultima Segmentum that fell to various Xeno species during the confusion following the Great Rift's formation. Their operations against Drukhari raiders in multiple systems have demonstrated that these enhanced warriors have fully embraced the chapter's aggressive combat doctrine, conducting boarding actions against enemy vessels with the same fervor and skill as any veteran sword brother. The diversity of threats facing the Imperium in the 42nd Millennium has forced the Black Templars to expand their tactical repertoire while maintaining their core identity. The Necrons, with their living metal bodies and reality-warping technologies, require different approaches than Orcs or Chaos Space Marines. The Tyranids, whose vast swarms can overwhelm through sheer numbers, demand careful resource management and surgical strikes against synapse creatures. The Tau, with their emphasis on ranged firepower and coordinated combined arms tactics, present challenges that play directly against Black Templar preferences for close combat. Yet in each case, the chapter has developed effective countermeasures without abandoning their fundamental character. Against Necrons, they emphasize overwhelming force at close range, where power weapons can disrupt the ancient Xenos' reanimation protocols faster than they can recover. Specialized kill teams target Necron command units and resurrection nodes, crippling the enemy's ability to reform after taking casualties. The Black Templars' traditional lack of psychers, once considered a liability, proves advantageous in the Pariah Nexus and other areas where Necron technology suppresses warp phenomena. Against Tyrannid swarms, the chapter employs mobile warfare doctrine, emphasizing rapid strikes against synapse creatures, followed by immediate withdrawal before the swarm can envelop assault forces. Thunderhawk gunships and land speeders provide mobility, allowing small strike teams to penetrate deep into Tyrannid formations, eliminate high-value targets, and extract before warrior organisms can coordinate effective responses. This approach, while less satisfying than the direct assaults Black Templars prefer, proves far more effective than attempting to out-attrition an enemy that can simply devour entire worlds to replenish losses. The Tiao Empire, despite its relatively small territory, represents a particularly frustrating opponent for the Black Templars. The Xeno's emphasis on ranged engagement and their willingness to withdraw rather than accept close combat directly counters Black Templar tactical preferences. The chapter has adapted by emphasizing night operations and assault from unexpected vectors, using teleportation and drop pod insertion to bypass Tau defensive lines entirely. Once among enemy positions where their superior close combat capabilities can be brought to bear, Black Templars make short work of Tau warriors whose equipment and training emphasizes ranged combat. Yet the most dangerous enemies remain those the chapter was founded to fight: the traitor legions and their demon allies who wage the long war from the Eye of Terror and the Great Rift. These foes understand Space Marine capabilities and limitations because they once were Space Marines themselves. They know the tactics, recognize the strategies, and can predict responses with deadly accuracy. Fighting them requires not just skill but adaptability, not just courage but cunning. The Black Templars bring both, their religious conviction providing resistance to the spiritual corruption chaos forces employ, while their combat experience allows them to counter familiar tactics with unexpected variations. The chapter's anti-chaos operations have intensified dramatically since the Great Rift's formation created vast new regions where the barrier between reality and the warp grows dangerously thin. Crusade fleets operating near the rift frequently encounter demon incursions that must be contained before they can spread. Marshal Amalrich's Crusade of Wrath, specializing in combating such threats, has developed extensive experience in the particular challenges these enemies present. Demons, being warp entities given physical form through emotion and belief, cannot be truly killed in conventional terms, only banished back to the immaterium until they can manifest again. The Black Templars address this limitation through sheer, overwhelming violence combined with spiritual fortification. Chaplains lead prayers and litanies that create zones of spiritual stability where reality resists warp intrusion. Within these sanctified areas, Black Templars can engage demons without fear of sudden reality shifts or impossible physics. Their absolute faith, made manifest through prayer and holy writ, becomes a weapon as potent as any blade. The Emperor's Champion plays a particularly crucial role in these engagements. This warrior, chosen through visions and armed with sacred relics, serves as a lightning rod for the enemy's attention. Demon princes and greater demons, beings of immense pride and power, find themselves drawn to single combat with the champion, viewing him as the greatest threat or the most desirable target. While these terrible duels unfold, other Black Templars exploit the distraction to achieve tactical objectives, destroying warp gates, collapsing summoning circles, or eliminating sorcerers maintaining demonic manifestations. The psychological warfare aspects of combat against chaos cannot be overlooked. The traitor legions employ terror as a weapon, seeking to break enemy morale through horrific displays and whispered promises of power. Against conventional forces, these tactics often prove devastatingly effective. Against Black Templars, they fail utterly. Warriors who view death in the Emperor's service as the highest honor possible cannot be cowed by threats of suffering. Those who possess absolute faith cannot be tempted by promises of power or immortality they view as corruption and damnation. The Black Templars' utter imperviousness to psychological manipulation, often frustrates Chaos forces, accustomed to breaking enemy resolve before physical combat even begins. The wars for Armageddon exemplify the Black Templars' approach to large-scale, protracted campaigns. This critical hive world has faced 3 major orc invasions over the past centuries, each requiring the commitment of enormous Imperial resources and resulting in casualties measured in billions. The Black Templars have participated in all 3 conflicts, each time making crucial contributions that help determine the outcome. During the Second War for Armageddon in 941 M41, High Marshal Helbrecht himself led nearly 1,000 Black Templars to the besieged world. Rather than concentrating forces in defensive positions as many Imperial Guard commanders preferred, Helbrecht employed the chapter's traditional aggressive tactics. Black Templar strike forces conducted offensive operations deep into orc-held territory, targeting supply lines and killing war bosses before they could fully mobilize their forces. These operations, while risky and resulting in significant casualties, prevented the orcs from achieving the overwhelming numerical superiority they required to simply crush Imperial defenses through weight of numbers. The defense of Hellsreach Hive during the Third War for Armageddon became legendary even by Black Templar standards. Reclusiarch Grimaldus, commanding all chapter forces in the Hive, refused to abandon even the most desperate positions. When the Temple of the Emperor Ascendant came under assault, he personally led its defense for 18 days against overwhelming orc forces. The temple's eventual destruction under sustained bombardment seemed to symbolize the futility of resistance. Yet Grimaldus emerged from the rubble carrying sacred relics he had protected throughout the siege. This act, choosing to preserve objects of faith rather than tactical assets, maintaining spiritual priorities even in the face of military disaster, perfectly encapsulated Black Templar philosophy and inspired the Hive's defenders to continue fighting despite devastating losses. The Armageddon campaigns also demonstrated the chapter's ability to coordinate with other Imperial forces while maintaining their independent command structure and tactical preferences. Black Templars fought alongside Imperial Guard regiments, providing the armored spearhead for combined arms operations. They supported Titan Legion deployments, using their mobility to protect the massive war machines from infantry assault. They coordinated with other Space Marine chapters despite significant doctrinal differences, focusing on shared objectives rather than philosophical disagreements. This cooperation extended to unlikely allies during particularly desperate situations. When portions of Armageddon's population turned to chaos worship in the Third War's later stages, Black Templars found themselves fighting alongside Sisters of Battle to purge the contamination. The 2 organizations shared faith-created natural synergy despite their different command structures and tactical doctrines. Chaplains and canonesses led joint prayer services before combined operations, while Black Templar assault teams and Sororitas cleansing squads methodically cleared corrupted Hive sectors. The relationship between Black Templars and Adepta Sororitas has consistently proven one of the Imperium's most effective interorganizational partnerships. Both groups share absolute faith in the Emperor's divinity and approach warfare as an act of worship rather than mere duty. This spiritual alignment transcends their organizational differences and operational specializations, creating bonds that facilitate cooperation even under the most challenging circumstances. Joint operations typically see Black Templars forming the armored spearhead, while Sisters of Battle provide supporting fire and numerical depth. The Space Marines' superior physical capabilities allow them to breach enemy defenses and engage the most dangerous opponents, while the Sisters' greater numbers enable them to secure objectives and process civilian populations. This division of labor plays to each force's strengths while compensating for their respective limitations. The Thruin Crusade in the late 41st millennium exemplified this partnership's potential. Marshal Amalrich's forces fought alongside the Order of the Ebon Chalice to cleanse, a cluster of shrine worlds corrupted by Alpha Legion infiltration. The campaign lasted nearly a decade with Black Templar assault teams and Sororita's purification squads working in close coordination. The Alpha Legion's preference for deception and infiltration meant that military victory required more than simply defeating enemy forces in battle. It required identifying and eliminating hidden traitors within seemingly loyal populations. The Black Templars focused on military targets, using their superior combat capabilities to neutralize Alpha Legion operatives and their cultist supporters. Meanwhile, the Sisters of Battle handled the far more complex task of screening civilian populations, identifying corruption before it could spread further while separating genuinely loyal citizens from those who had been compromised. Their different but complementary approaches allowed for more efficient operations than either force could have managed alone, achieving strategic objectives faster and with fewer civilian casualties than would otherwise have been possible. This partnership extends beyond battlefield coordination into intelligence sharing and mutual support. Black Templar Crusade fleets operating in the same sectors as Sororita's convents exchange information about emerging threats and coordinate responses. The chapter's extensive network of chapter keeps sometimes provides sanctuary for sisters' forces in transit, while Sororita's convents occasionally offer medical care for Black Templar wounded beyond their own apothecarian's capabilities. Some Crusade fleets maintain dedicated liaison officers who specialize in coordinating with Sororita's forces, ensuring smooth communication and minimizing misunderstandings. The relationship remains pragmatic rather than sentimental, however. Both organizations recognize that they serve the same divine emperor but through different means and towards slightly different ends. Theological debates between Black Templar chaplains and Sororita's priests occasionally become heated, particularly regarding the proper relationship between martial action and contemplative worship. But these disagreements rarely affect operational cooperation, as both groups prioritize practical results over philosophical purity. The Black Templars' relationship with their progenitor chapter, the Imperial Fists, remains complex and multifaceted after 10 millennia of independent existence. Both chapters venerate Rogel Dorn and share the same gene seed, yet their divergent paths since the second founding have created significant differences in culture, doctrine, and theology. The Imperial Fists maintain the secular approach established during the Great Crusade, viewing the Emperor as humanity's greatest leader, but not as divine. This philosophical divide creates tension during joint operations, though shared genetic heritage and mutual respect generally prevent serious conflicts. The Feast of Blades serves as the primary formal connection between the Imperial Fists and their successor chapters. This tournament, held once every century, brings together champions from all of Dorn's descendants to compete in ritual combat. The event serves multiple purposes beyond simply identifying the best swordsman. It maintains connections between chapters that might otherwise lose contact across the vast distances of the galaxy. It provides opportunities for intelligence sharing about threats facing different sectors, and it reminds all participants of their shared heritage and common purpose despite their differences. Black Templar champions have claimed victory in the Feast of Blades on numerous occasions, most notably in 945 M41, when Sword Brother Adelard defeated all challengers despite suffering a grievous wound in his second bout. His victory, achieved through sheer determination and refusal to yield despite his injuries, perfectly embodied the stubbornness inherited from Dorn and refined through Black Templar spiritual discipline. The tournament concluded with a war council where representatives from participating chapters shared intelligence about threats across their operational areas. The Black Templars' vast network of Crusade fleets often provided information from distant regions that might otherwise have escaped notice, their contributions valued despite occasional theological friction with more secular chapters. Beyond these formal gatherings, cooperation between the Black Templars and Imperial Fists occurs most frequently during major campaigns threatening core Imperial worlds. The Third War for Armageddon saw substantial forces from both chapters deployed to the beleaguered Hive world, with the Imperial Fists focusing on defensive operations, while Black Templars conducted aggressive counterattacks against Orc formations. This natural division of responsibilities played to each chapter's particular strengths, while minimizing doctrinal conflicts that might have complicated unified command structures. The relationship extends to sharing of resources and expertise in certain specialized areas. When Black Templar Forge ships require particularly complex repairs beyond their own technical capabilities, they sometimes dock at Imperial Fists fortress monasteries, where more extensive facilities are available. Similarly, Imperial Fists recruiting worlds occasionally provide aspirants to Black Templar Crusade fleets passing through their systems, maintaining genetic and cultural connections between the chapters. These practical arrangements benefit both organizations while acknowledging their continued familial bonds. Relations with other Imperial Fist successors vary considerably depending on each chapter's particular traditions and operational focus. The Black Templars maintain especially close ties with the Crimson Fists, whose more balanced approach to the Codex Astartes and moderate religious practices position them as something of a middle ground between the zealous Black Templar and their more secular progenitors. Joint operations between these two chapters occur with relative frequency, particularly against Orc threats, where the Crimson Fist's extensive experience with greenskin warfare proves invaluable. The Excoriators chapter shares the Black Templars' preference for aggressive engagement, though without the overtly religious overtones that characterize Black Templar operations. Their similar tactical doctrines facilitate smooth battlefield cooperation, with each chapter respecting the other's combat prowess while maintaining separate command structures. Several notable campaigns in the Segmentum Obscurus have featured Black Templar assault forces creating breaches that Excoriator tactical squads then exploited, demonstrating effective coordination despite limited joint training. More complex is the relationship with chapters that place heavy emphasis on psychic warfare or maintain extensive librarious departments. The White Scar's integration of Stormseer traditions into their combat doctrine creates friction when they operate alongside Black Templars, whose deep suspicion of psychers can impede tactical coordination. During joint operations, careful mission planning becomes essential to minimize situations requiring close cooperation between Black Templar assault forces and White Scar's librarians. Similarly, the Blood Raven's scholarly approach and extensive use of psychers in battlefield command roles often conflicts with Black Templar preferences, necessitating clear delineation of operational areas to avoid direct conflicts in methodology. Despite these occasional tensions, the Black Templars have proven capable of setting aside doctrinal differences when strategic necessity demands cooperation. They understand that the Imperium's survival requires unity of purpose if not unity of method, that the galaxy's myriad threats can only be met through coordinated action despite philosophical disagreements. This pragmatic flexibility, combined with absolute conviction in their own approach, allows them to work alongside organizations whose methods they find questionable while never compromising their own principles. The tension between the Black Templars and certain elements within the Adeptus Mechanicus stems from fundamentally different worldviews regarding technology, faith, and the proper relationship between humanity and the tools it employs. The Mechanicus venerates the machine god and views technology through a quasi-religious lens of ritual and tradition, treating machine spirits as semi-divine entities deserving worship in their own right. The Black Templars, by contrast, see machines as tools granted by the Emperor for mankind's use in his service, valuable certainly, worthy of proper maintenance and respect, but ultimately subordinate to human, will rather than objects of veneration themselves. This philosophical divide manifests in numerous practical conflicts during routine interactions. When Black Templar forces requisition supplies from Forge worlds, Mechanicus representatives often object to the chapter's practice of modifying standard equipment without elaborate rituals or technical oversight. The Black Templars, focused on combat effectiveness rather than doctrinal purity, dismiss these concerns as irrelevant to their mission. They modify weapons to better suit their preferred tactics, adjust armor configurations based on operational experience, and generally treat equipment as means to an end, rather than sacred objects requiring careful propitiation. The conflict first emerged openly during the early Crusades of the 31st Millennium, when Black Templar forces requisitioned supplies from Forge worlds near their operational areas. Tech priests objected strenuously to the chapter's cavalier attitude toward established protocols and their willingness to field-modify equipment without proper blessings or technical documentation. The Black Templars, viewing such concerns as bureaucratic obstacles hindering their ability to bring the Emperor's judgment to his enemies, Ely ignored these protests. This pattern, practical demands met with ritual objections followed by impatient dismissal, established a template for interactions that would repeat across millennia. Matters escalated during the Moari Schism of the 35th Millennium, when a coalition of conservative tech priests attempted to standardize all Adeptus Astartes equipment according to strict Mechanicus templates. The Black Templars, along with several other chapters, flatly refused to surrender their armories for realignment. They argued that their modifications, developed through millennia of combat experience, represented improvements rather than deviations, practical adaptations that enhanced effectiveness rather than theological violations requiring correction. The standoff nearly escalated to open conflict before inquisitorial intervention resolved the immediate crisis, though underlying tensions remained unaddressed. In the modern era, relations between Black Templars and Mechanicus vary dramatically depending on specific Forge worlds and Crusade fleets involved. Some pragmatic tech priests recognize the chapter's exceptional combat record and accommodate their needs with minimal friction, focusing on results rather than procedural orthodoxy. These enlightened Mechanicus representatives understand that warriors who have prosecuted successful campaigns for 10,000 years might possess insights worth respecting, even if those insights don't align perfectly with established doctrine. Other tech priests maintain rigid adherence to Mechanicus protocols, providing exactly what is requested but nothing more, and registering formal protests when the chapter modifies equipment beyond authorized parameters. These by-the-book Mechanicus representatives see themselves as guardians of proper technological practice, viewing Black Templar field modifications as dangerous precedents that could spread to other organizations. The Black Templars typically respond to such objections with polite indifference, acknowledging the protests while continuing their established practices. These tensions become particularly acute regarding fleet maintenance. The massive battle barges and strike cruisers serving as mobile fortress monasteries require extensive technical support that only the Mechanicus can provide. Repairs to void shields, recalibration of plasma reactors, maintenance of gellar fields that protect vessels during warp transit. Yet the Black Templars insist on maintaining control over certain systems, particularly targeting arrays, life support networks, and internal security protocols. This divided authority creates inevitable conflicts, with tech priests objecting to unauthorized modifications while Black Templar tech marines defend their right to adapt vessels to the chapter's specific operational needs. Despite ongoing tensions, necessity forces cooperation. The Black Templars require the Mechanicus's production capacity and technical expertise to sustain their eternal crusade. They cannot manufacture their own power armor, cannot produce bolt weapons in sufficient quantities, cannot maintain their fleet without Mechanicus support. Meanwhile, the Mechanicus benefits from the chapter's willingness to defend Forge worlds against external threats, and their ability to recover archaeotech from hostile environments where other forces would fail. This mutual dependence prevents the relationship from deteriorating into outright hostility, instead maintaining a state of professional tension, managed through carefully negotiated agreements and tacit understandings. The Black Templars' attitude towards Psykers represents one of their most distinctive and controversial characteristics. Their deep suspicion of warp-based powers sets them apart not only from many other Space Marine chapters, but from Imperial military doctrine more broadly. This stance stems from both theological convictions and practical concerns about corruption, creating a position that has evolved somewhat over the millennia while maintaining its fundamental character. At its foundation, the Black Templars' anti-Psyker stance reflects their interpretation of the Emperor's will and the nature of spiritual purity. They believe psychic powers represent a dangerous shortcut, abilities accessed without the discipline and sacrifice required by conventional training. More concerning still is the source of these powers, the warp itself, that realm of chaos and madness home to the very entities that oppose the Emperor's vision for humanity. Using such abilities, even with proper training and safeguards, creates an inherent connection to this corrupting realm. Each time a Psyker reaches into the warp to manifest their powers, they open a potential gateway through which demons might reach into reality. This theological position manifested most visibly in the chapter's historical refusal to maintain a librarius, while codex-compliant chapters carefully cultivated and trained battle Psykers to support their operations. The Black Templars rejected this practice entirely for most of their history. They preferred to rely on faith, firepower, and blade work rather than warp manipulation, viewing this as both spiritually purer and ultimately more reliable. When faced with enemy Psykers on the battlefield, they developed specialized tactics focusing on rapid identification and elimination rather than psychic countermeasures. The best defense against a witch was a bolt round through the skull before they could manifest their corrupting powers. The chapter's position began shifting subtly in the mid-36th millennium, following devastating encounters with demonic entities in the Ghoul Stars region. These conflicts demonstrated the practical limitations of forces without any psychic defenses, as Black Templar Crusade fleets suffered disproportionate casualties against warp-empowered enemies who could manipulate reality itself. High Marshal Ludys, ever the pragmatist, recognized that doctrinal purity could not justify needless sacrifice of his warriors when alternatives existed. The resulting compromise maintained the chapter's theological objections to psychic powers while acknowledging their tactical utility in specific circumstances. Rather than establishing a full librarius with all its institutional implications, the Black Templars began reluctantly accepting a small number of battle brothers who manifested psychic abilities during their training or service. These individuals, carefully monitored by chaplains who watched constantly for signs of corruption, were permitted to use their powers exclusively for defensive purposes and counter-psychic operations. This limited acceptance came with extraordinarily strict conditions that reflected the chapter's continuing wariness. Psychically gifted battle brothers were required to undergo additional spiritual training beyond that expected of their brothers, extended periods of isolation for meditation and prayer, regular fasting to strengthen spiritual discipline, constant examination by chaplains who evaluated their mental state and spiritual purity. They were explicitly prohibited from using their abilities except in direct response to enemy psychic attacks, or when specifically authorized by a chaplain or marshal who judged such use necessary. Most significantly, they were expected to view their powers as a burden and a curse rather than a gift, a dangerous tool to be employed only when absolutely no alternative existed. The chapter's ambivalence toward these warriors manifests in numerous subtle ways that reinforce their liminal status. They rarely rise to leadership positions despite their combat effectiveness, as many Black Templars remain uncomfortable taking orders from those with warp connections. They typically maintain separate quarters aboard Crusade vessels, ostensibly for meditation, but effectively creating physical segregation from their brothers. During pre-battle rituals, they undergo additional purification ceremonies not required of non-psychic warriors, extra prayers and anointments meant to fortify their souls against the temptations inherent in their abilities. This compromised position has created internal tensions that persist into the present era. Conservative elements within the chapter, particularly among older chaplains who remember the days before any psychers were tolerated, continue advocating for a return to the pure rejection of psychic powers that characterized the chapter's early millennia. They argue that faith alone should suffice, that accepting psychic powers, even in limited forms, represents a dangerous compromise with corruption. More pragmatic voices, often found among frontline marshals who have witnessed the practical value of psychic defenses, argue for fuller integration of these abilities into the chapter's combat doctrine, while maintaining appropriate spiritual safeguards. The reality on the ground typically depends on the specific Crusade fleet and its leadership. Some fleets maintain extremely strict limitations on psychic activity, deploying their gifted battle brothers only in the most desperate circumstances and never without chaplain supervision. Others have developed more integrated approaches, incorporating defensive psychic operations into their standard tactical repertoire, while maintaining careful theological distinctions between these sanctioned activities and the corrupted practices of enemy witches. This variation reflects the chapter's decentralized structure. Each marshal possesses sufficient autonomy to interpret doctrine according to his understanding, creating natural diversity within the broader framework of shared principles. This internal debate mirrors broader tensions within imperial society regarding the use of psychic powers. The Black Templars' evolving position, absolute rejection softening into grudging, limited acceptance, parallels similar shifts throughout the Imperium as the practical necessity of psychic abilities becomes increasingly apparent in the face of growing warp disturbances and demonic incursions. The opening of the Great Rift has only intensified these pressures, forcing even the most doctrinaire organizations to reconsider long-held positions when survival itself hangs in the balance. In stark contrast to their uneasy relationship with Psychers, stands the Black Templars' highly productive alliance with the Adeptus Sororitas. These two organizations, despite their different origins, structures, and tactical specializations, share fundamental values that facilitate cooperation across innumerable battlefields and campaigns. Their theological alignment, combined with complementary combat doctrines, has created one of the Imperium's most consistently effective recurring partnerships. The foundation of this alliance lies in their shared and absolute faith. Both organizations embrace the Emperor's divinity without reservation, without the doubts or qualifications that sometimes afflict more secular institutions. They view combat not as regrettable necessity but as sacred act, warfare as the truest form of worship. Victory becomes confirmation of divine favor, while defeat, when it occurs, represents either a test of faith or punishment for insufficient devotion. When Black Templars and Sisters of Battle fight together, they do so within this common spiritual framework that transcends organizational differences and creates bonds deeper than mere tactical coordination. This theological alignment extends to their view of the enemy. Both groups approach heretics, xenos, and witches with uncompromising hostility, seeing these foes not merely as military threats, but as affronts to the divine order that must be expunged. Neither organization inclines toward mercy when confronting the Emperor's enemies. There are no prisoners taken for later exchange, no negotiations with those who have rejected his light, no compromise with corruption. This shared operational philosophy minimizes friction regarding treatment of defeated enemies or civilian populations in contested areas, as both groups understand and accept each other's methods without requiring extensive justification or explanation. Beyond these spiritual commonalities, practical factors contribute to highly effective coordination. The Sisters of Battle, while formidable warriors, lack the physical enhancements of Astartes. This natural capability difference creates clear role differentiation on the battlefield, rather than competition or confusion about responsibilities. Black Templars typically form the armored spearhead of joint operations, using their superior strength, resilience, and firepower to break enemy formations and create breaches in defensive lines. Sisters of Battle forces then exploit these openings, their greater numbers and sustained firepower allowing them to secure objectives and hold territory that the more mobile Space Marines have cleared. This pattern of cooperation has proven particularly effective against entrenched chaos cults and heretical uprisings. The Black Templars' shock assault capabilities allow them to quickly neutralize the most dangerous enemy assets, sorcerers maintaining demonic summonings, heavy weapons emplacements, command elements coordinating defensive efforts. Meanwhile, the Sisters' ability to deploy in greater numbers enables them to process civilian populations, conducting the delicate work of identifying and eliminating hidden cultists, while separating innocent bystanders for evacuation or re-education. Their different but complementary skill sets allow for more efficient operations than either force could manage independently. The Thurin Crusade stands as perhaps the finest example of this partnership's potential. Marshal Amalric's forces fought alongside the Order of the Ebon Chalice for nearly a decade to cleanse a cluster of shrine worlds corrupted by Alpha Legion infiltration. The campaign's complexity, requiring not just military victory, but the identification and elimination of deeply embedded traitor agents, demanded close coordination between organizations with different capabilities and operational methods. The Black Templars focused their efforts on military targets, using their superior combat capabilities to destroy Alpha Legion operatives and their cultist supporters in direct engagements. When traitor agents were located, Black Templar assault teams struck with overwhelming force, giving the enemy no opportunity to escape or go to ground. Meanwhile, the Sisters of Battle handled the far more challenging task of population screening. Alpha Legion infiltration techniques meant that traitors could be anyone: planetary governors, minor officials, seemingly loyal soldiers, even clergy within the ecclesiarchy itself. The Sisters conducted systematic interrogations, applied theological tests to identify doctrinal deviations, and ultimately made the terrible decision about who could be trusted and who must face the Emperor's judgment. Their complementary approaches allowed them to achieve strategic objectives faster and with fewer civilian casualties than would otherwise have been possible. The Black Templars prevented Alpha Legion forces from simply melting into the population to regroup later, while the Sisters ensured that cleared areas remained secure rather than becoming re-infiltrated after Imperial forces moved on. By the campaign's conclusion, the Shrine worlds had been thoroughly cleansed, with their populations certified as free from taint, a result impossible for either force operating alone. This alliance extends beyond battlefield coordination into broader areas of cooperation. Black Templar Crusade fleets operating in the same sectors, as Sororita's convent routinely exchange intelligence about emerging threats, share logistical resources when supply lines are strained, and coordinate their strategic planning to avoid duplicating efforts or leaving gaps in coverage. The chapter's extensive network of chapter keeps sometimes provides sanctuary and resupply points for Sisters forces in transit between assignments. Sororita's medical facilities occasionally treat Black Templar wounded when their own apothecarians are overwhelmed, as the Sisters experience treating augmented warriors, proves valuable despite the physiological differences between standard humans and Astartes. Some Crusade fleets maintain dedicated liaison officers who specialize in coordinating with Sororita's forces. These warriors, typically chaplains or senior battle brothers with diplomatic skills, ensure smooth communication between the organizations and help minimize misunderstandings that might otherwise complicate joint operations. They study Sororita's tactical doctrine and organizational structure, learning to anticipate how sister forces will respond to various situations and how best to integrate Black Templar operations with their activities. The relationship, while highly productive, remains fundamentally pragmatic rather than sentimental. Both organizations recognize that they serve the same divine emperor but through different means and toward ends that, while compatible, are not identical. Theological debates between Black Templar chaplains and Sororita's priests can become quite heated, particularly regarding the proper balance between martial action and contemplative worship, or the appropriate role of miracle and faith versus training and discipline. Some sisters view the Black Templars' independence from ecclesiarchy authority as problematic, while some Black Templars find Sororita's deference to church hierarchy excessive and potentially constraining. But these philosophical disagreements rarely affect operational cooperation in practice. Both groups prioritize practical results over abstract purity, understanding that defeating the emperor's enemies matters more than winning theological arguments. When a hive city burns with heresy or a demon incursion threatens to consume a shrine world, Black Templars and Sisters of Battle stand together without hesitation, their minor differences forgotten in the face of existential threats requiring unified response. As the 42nd millennium unfolds and the Imperium confronts challenges that would have seemed impossible even a century ago, this partnership has become increasingly vital. The Great Rift's formation created vast new frontiers where traditional imperial authority has weakened or collapsed entirely. In these dark regions, Black Templars and Sisters of Battle often find themselves as the only reliable imperial military forces, the only organizations with sufficient faith and determination to operate effectively where others have fled or fallen to despair. Their alliance, forged over millennia of shared struggle and sustained by absolute conviction in their divine purpose, may prove essential to humanity's survival in the coming darkness. The wars that have defined the Black Templars over 10 millennia are too numerous to chronicle exhaustively. Thousands of campaigns across every corner of the galaxy, against every imaginable enemy, in environments ranging from frozen death worlds to demon-infested warp storms. Yet certain conflicts stand out for their scale, significance, or the lessons they taught. These crucibles tested the chapter's faith and capabilities, refining their doctrine through the harshest teacher imaginable, warfare without quarter against foes who gave none. The Declate's Crusade of the 36th millennium stands as one of the most harrowing campaigns in chapter history. Declate's Prime had been a jewel of the Adeptus Mechanicus, a forge world whose vast manufactorums produced everything from lemon rust battle tanks to specialized void shields for Imperial battleships. When astropathic communications from the system suddenly ceased, the Mechanicus initially suspected nothing more sinister than warp disturb. Bances affecting transmission. Such interruptions occurred regularly, requiring patience rather than immediate concern. 3 standard years of silence passed before an automated merchant vessel returned from the Declate system, its hull scorched with strange symbols that seemed to writhe when observed directly. Its cargo holds contain not the expected munitions, but bizarre mechanical constructs that seem to blend flesh and metal in ways violating both Imperial technology protocols and natural law. When tech priests attempted to access the vessel's logs, they triggered a scrapcode virus that nearly overwhelmed Port Sanctus's defense systems, corrupting machine spirits and creating cascading failures throughout multiple systems before being contained. The The Mechanicus, recognizing the terrifying implications, immediately quarantined all information regarding Declate's Prime and petitioned the Inquisition for intervention. Inquisitor Hezek Crasillus of the Ordo Hereticus assembled a strike force including elements from the Sisters of Battle, Imperial Navy assets, and a small contingent of Grey Knights. Their initial reconnaissance mission confirmed humanity's worst fears. Declate's Prime had fallen completely to the ruinous powers, specifically to the corrupting influence of the Dark Mechanicum. High Marshal Bohemond received the Inquisition's request for assistance while his fleet resupplied at the fortress world of Bacca. The timing proved fortuitous. The Black Templars had just concluded a successful campaign against Drukhari raiders in a neighboring sector and had nearly their full strength available for immediate redeployment. Bohemond committed 5 Crusade fleets to the Declate's campaign, assembling one of the largest Black Templar concentrations seen since the 32nd millennium. Over 1,500 battle brothers gathered for this operation, supported by extensive vehicle assets and fleet elements. The initial void engagement above Declate's Prime revealed the full extent of the corruption that had consumed the Forge world. Its defense monitors had been transformed into grotesque amalgams of machine and flesh, their weapons systems modified to fire not only conventional munitions, but also warp-infused energy that could penetrate void shields through dimensional bleeding. 3 Black Templar strike cruisers were lost in the first hour of battle, their crews dying to a man as reality itself fractured around them, before the chapter's fleet adapted its tactics. They employed short-range warp jumps to confuse the targeting systems of corrupted vessels, micro-translations that disoriented the enemy, while allowing Black Templar gunners to acquire firing solutions on disabled or confused targets. Marshal Gerhardt led the first ground assault, deploying with 400 battle brothers via drop pod into what had once been the Forge world's primary administrative district. What they found defied rational comprehension. The one-sorterly streets had been reshaped into spiral patterns that hurt the eye to follow, geometries that seemed to twist back upon themselves in ways three-dimensional space should not permit. Buildings had been partially melted and reformed into towers resembling skeletal hands reaching toward a polluted sky roiling with unnatural colors. Worst of all, the population had not been killed but transformed. Former human workers stumbled through the twisted cityscape with mechanical components erupting from their flesh in configurations that should have killed them instantly, but somehow sustained obscene life. The fighting in the administrative district lasted 17 days without pause, 17 days of continuous combat without rest or respite. The Black Templars discovered that conventional tactics proved woefully ineffective against the corrupted Forge world defenders. The enemy fought without any concern for self-preservation, pressing attacks with suicidal determination. Seemingly fatal wounds often resulted in spontaneous mutations that rendered targets even more dangerous. A warrior struck down would rise moments later with new limbs sprouting from the wound, with weapons fused directly into mutating flesh. Chaplain Grimald adapted the chapter's approach through brutal trial and error, eventually instructing his warriors to focus on complete physical destruction of enemy forms rather than merely incapacitating them. Heads were to be separated from bodies and then destroyed entirely. Limbs were to be severed and incinerated, torsos split open, and vital organs removed. Only through this comprehensive dismemberment could the Black Templars ensure enemies would not regenerate or mutate into new horrors. The chapter's flamers and meltaguns, typically reserved for anti-armor operations, became primary weapons in the close quarters fighting, their ability to completely obliterate targets proving more valuable than the precision of bolter fire. While Marshal Gerhardt's forces secured a tenuous foothold in the administrative district, Marshal Theodoric led a second landing force targeting the Forge world's primary plasma reactor complex. Intelligence suggested this facility had been transformed into something far more sinister than its original purpose, a massive ritual site where the corrupted tech priests channeled energies toward purposes that defied comprehension. Reconnaissance from orbit revealed the reactor's containment chamber had been repurposed as a warp portal, with thousands of former Mechanicus personnel arranged in concentric circles around it. Their bodies fused together into a living calculation engine maintaining the portal's stability. The Black Templars' attack on the reactor complex coincided with a ritual cycle reaching its apex. As Theodoric's forces fought through the outer defenses, breaching walls and destroying corrupted servitors by the hundreds, the portal within the containment chamber pulsed with increasing intensity. Sword Brother Adelard, leading the vanguard, reported glimpsing something massive attempting to push through from the other side. A demon engine of unprecedented scale, a Titan-class monstrosity that would have devastated Imperial forces across the entire system if it manifested successfully. Recognizing the catastrophic threat, Marshal Theodoric ordered an immediate assault on the inner sanctum regardless of casualties. The careful tactical planning that normally characterized Black Templar operations was abandoned in favor of desperate speed. 3 successive waves of warriors fought their way toward the containment chamber, each group reduced to barely squad strength by the time they reached their objective through sheer weight of enemy resistance. The third wave, led by Theodoric himself, managed to breach the final defenses just as the portal reached critical stability, the moment before full manifestation when the demon engine would cross fully into real space. What transpired within that chamber remained sealed in inquisitorial records, classified at the highest levels of the Ordo Hereticus, but the external effects were witnessed by Imperial forces throughout the system and recorded in multiple logs. A column of warp energy erupted from the Forge world's surface, visible even from neighboring planets, a pillar of impossible colors that seemed to burn the eye to observe. Then the entire reactor complex imploded, reality collapsing inward as if the universe itself rejected what had been attempting to manifest. The implosion created a crater 15 kilometers wide, utterly annihilating everything within its radius. When reconnaissance craft finally managed to approach the site 2 days later, fighting through lingering warp disturbances that made sensors unreliable and navigation treacherous, they found the portal closed and the demon engine's manifestation prevented. At the crater's center lay Marshal Theodoric's broken body, his armor fused with the remains of what appeared to be a mechanical greater demon. Both had been caught in the implosion and destroyed, their final struggle frozen in twisted metal and ceramite that would never fully separate. The Marshal's gene seed was recovered intact, allowing his genetic legacy to continue even as his life ended in that moment of supreme sacrifice. The destruction of the primary portal broke the coordination of the corrupted Forge world defenders, but the campaign was far from over. For another 3 months, the Black Templars methodically cleansed Declate's prime sector by sector, building by building in some cases. They developed specialized protocols for clearing corrupted facilities, always advancing with flamers ready, always ensuring complete destruction of enemy remains, always maintaining prayer wheels and holy icons to stabilize reality in areas where the barrier between materium and immaterium had grown dangerously thin. The final phase involved the complete demolition of the entire Forge complex using cyclonic torpedoes, a rare and extreme authorization granted personally by the Fabricator General of Mars. The decision to destroy rather than reclaim such a valuable facility demonstrated how completely the corruption had spread. The Mechanicus itself, normally obsessed with recovering lost technology regardless of cost, declared that nothing could be salvaged. Every SDC template, every manufactorum, every data vault had been so thoroughly tainted that attempting recovery would risk spreading the contamination to Mars itself. The Declate's Crusade established several tactical precedents that the Black Templars would apply in future campaigns against chaos-corrupted Forge worlds. The chapter developed specialized equipment for dealing with possessed machine spirits, including null-field generators that could temporarily disrupt the connection between corrupted machines and their warp entities. They formalized protocols for identifying and targeting nexus points of large-scale corruption, ritual. Sites, summoning chambers, places where the material and immaterial bled together. Destroying these nodes became the priority, superseding conventional strategic objectives like securing resources or eliminating enemy leadership. More significantly, the campaign reinforced a fundamental truth about warfare against chaos that the Black Templars would never forget. Conventional tactical thinking often proved worse than useless, and sometimes actively counterproductive. The enemy did not value their own lives, did not fear death, could not be demoralized by casualties or intimidated by displays of force. Only absolute physical destruction combined with unwavering spiritual fortification could prevail. This understanding would guide Black Templar operations against chaos forces for millennia to come, shaping their doctrine in ways that set them apart from chapters who had less extensive experience fighting the ruinous powers. A century after the purging of Declate's Prime, the Black Templars faced a threat of entirely different character in the distant reaches of the galaxy. The Vinculus Crusade began in 567 M36, when long-range augur arrays detected a massive orc migration emerging from the Ghoul Stars, a region notorious for strange phenomena, unexplained disappearances, and deadly xeno species operating far from Imperial observation. Initial Imperial Navy reconnaissance confirmed the worst. A full-scale WAAGH had formed under the leadership of a particularly cunning orc warlord known as Grimtusk, the Planet Breaker. The Ghoul Stars region had always presented unique challenges for Imperial forces. Its immense distance from major supply lines, combined with unusual stellar phenomena that disrupted warp travel in unpredictable ways, made sustained military operations extraordinarily difficult. Several previous attempts to establish permanent Imperial presence in the region had ended in disaster, with entire colonization fleets disappearing without trace. The approaching orc WAAGH threatened not only these tenuous Imperial holdings, but also the more established worlds along the eastern fringe, where billions of Imperial citizens would find themselves in the Greenskins' path. High Marshal Lazarus, recognizing both the threat and the strategic opportunity, declared the Vinculus Crusade with an unusual directive that demonstrated remarkable strategic vision. The objective was not merely to defeat the orc forces in a single decisive campaign, but to establish permanent Black Templar presence in the Ghoul Stars region. This decision reflected the chapter's increasing strategic independence. While other Astartes chapters typically coordinated their deployments with broader Imperial military planning and deferred to administratum strategic priorities, the Black Templars had developed a practice of identifying and addressing threats based on their own intelligence networks and strategic assessment. The initial phase involved establishing forward bases directly in the path of the approaching WAAGH. Marshal Constantin led this effort, selecting 3 marginally habitable worlds and constructing fortified chapter keeps on each with remarkable speed. These keeps were designed not as the permanent installations typical of Codex chapters, but as robust staging areas capable of supporting up to 300 battle brothers, each with associated equipment and vessels. Their strategic placement created a triangular zone of control that the orc forces would need to pass through to reach more densely populated Imperial space, creating a killing ground where Black Templar forces could engage the enemy on favorable terms. The first major engagement came at the frontier world of Nemesis Tessera, where an orc vanguard fleet attempted to establish a beachhead for the main WAAGH. Marshal Constantin had anticipated this move through careful analysis of greenskin behavior patterns and positioned 2 strike cruisers in the system's outer reaches, hidden within the debris field of a shattered moon. When the orc vessels committed to low orbit, beginning their landing operations, the Black Templars executed a pincer movement of devastating effectiveness. They caught the greenskin ships between their cruisers emerging from concealment and ground-based defense batteries, creating a crossfire that the Orcs' crude tactics could not counter. The resulting void battle lasted less than 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the vanguard force. This initial victory, however, proved deceptive. The main body of Grimtusk's WAAGH arrived 3 weeks later with a fleet 3 times larger than Imperial intelligence had estimated, a massive armada of ramshackle but deadly vessels cobbled together from the wreckage of 1,000 battles. Rather than approaching from a single predictable vector as greenskins typically did, they split into 5 separate battle groups, each targeting a different system. This strategy, unusually sophisticated, Ed for Orcs, suggested that Grimtusk possessed tactical acumen well beyond the norm for his species, perhaps even approaching the cunning of the legendary Gaz Kolthraka. Marshal Constantine faced an agonizing decision. Conventional Astartes doctrine advised concentrating forces to achieve overwhelming superiority at decisive points, but following this principle would mean abandoning 4 systems to greenskin devastation while defending the 5th. He chose instead to divide his forces, a decision that went against his training, but reflected the Black Templars' distinctive flexibility. He assigned veteran Castellan Dorn to defend Nemesis Tessera with 200 battle brothers, while he personally led a rapid response force that would use a series of calculated warp jumps to reinforce whichever system faced the greatest pressure. The next 3 months saw some of the most mobile warfare in chapter history. The Black Templars deliberately avoided set-piece battles where the Orcs' numerical advantage would prove overwhelming. Instead, they employed hit-and-run tactics, disrupting landing operations before the greenskins could establish fortified positions, destroying key assets like fuel depots and ammunition stores, and targeting warbosses whose deaths would fragment Orc command structures. Thunderhawk gunships struck with surgical precision before disappearing into the void. Sword Brethren led teleport assaults against command vessels, materializing aboard enemy ships to assassinate Orc leaders before extracting. These operations inflicted disproportionate damage on the WAAGH, while preserving the chapter's limited manpower. The turning point came when Imperial augurs detected Grimtusk's personal battle barge entering the Vinculus system. This massive vessel, cobbled together from the remains of several captured Imperial capital ships and held together as much by Orc belief as by actual engineering, served as both the warlord's mobile fortress and the psychological linchpin of his WAAGH. Marshal Constantine recognized the opportunity immediately, killed Grimtusk, and the entire invasion would fragment into smaller, more manageable threats. He concentrated all available forces for an assault on this critical target, calling in every squad that could reach the system in time. The boarding action against Grimtusk's vessel became legendary within the chapter. 120 Black Templars, led by Constantine himself, teleported directly onto the Orc flagship's bridge level in the largest single teleport insertion the Crusade had attempted. They materialized into a nightmarish environment where original Imperial architecture had been crudely modified with Orc engineering, creating a labyrinthine battleground of narrow corridors suddenly opening into vast chambers, of gravity that shifted unpredictably, of atmosphere that alternated between choking smoke and toxic fumes. The teleport insertion scattered the assault force more widely than intended, a common risk with such operations, but particularly dangerous in enemy-held territory. Small groups of battle brothers found themselves isolated deep within the vessel, forced to fight through hordes of Orcs toward the central command area. The greenskins, caught by surprise but recovering quickly, mounted fierce resistance. Their crude but effective weapons, massive cleavers, roaring choppas, crude but powerful shooters, tested even ceramite armor. Several Black Templars fell in the initial minutes, overwhelmed by sheer numbers before they could regroup with their brothers. Marshal Constantine and his command squad, through a combination of skill and fortune, were the first to reach Grimtusk's throne room, a vast chamber dominated by a crude throne fashioned from the command throne of an imperial battleship, surrounded by trophy racks displaying the skulls of hundreds of enemies. The Orc warlord proved a monster even by the formidable standards of his kind, standing nearly 4 meters tall and clad in armor salvaged from a Knight Titan. His weapons were equally impressive, a power claw that crackled with poorly understood energy, and a massive shooter that fired shells the size of a man's fist. The duel between Constantine and Grimtusk lasted nearly 20 minutes, an eternity in close combat. The Marshal fought with all the skill accumulated over 2 centuries of warfare, every technique learned, every lesson written in the blood of fallen brothers applied with desperate precision. He dodged attacks that would have torn him in half, parried blows that would have crushed his skull, struck at weak points in the Orc's armor with patient persistence. Grimtusk, for his part, fought with a cunning that belied his brutish appearance, feinting and maneuvering in ways few Orcs managed, using his environment and his massive strength to force Constantine into disadvantageous positions. The Marshal finally prevailed by exploiting a weakness in the Orc's salvaged armor, the point WH. Their 2 different systems had been imperfectly joined, leaving a gap barely wide enough for a power sword blade. Constantine's strike penetrated deep into Grimtusk's torso, the disruption field tearing through alien organs with catastrophic effect. The warlord's death bellow echoed through the entire ship, a sound of rage and denial that galvanized his followers into suicidal fury, but also signaled to other Orcs throughout the system that their leader had fallen. The death of Grimtusk did not immediately end the WAGH, as Orcs do not simply surrender or withdraw when their leaders fall, but it removed the strategic coordination that had made this invasion exceptionally dangerous. Over the following year, the Black Templars systematically isolated and destroyed the remaining Orc battle groups. Rather than attempting to cleanse every world touched by the Greenskins, an impossible task given their limited numbers and the Orcs' incredible resilience, they focused on destroying the largest concentrations of Xenos and eliminating any emerging warbosses before they could consolidate power. This strategic approach ensured that while Orc presence remained in the region, scattered and fragmented across dozens of worlds, it would take centuries for another WAGH of similar scale to form. The Black Templars had not achieved total victory in the conventional sense. Orcs would plague the Ghoul Stars for generations, but they had accomplished their actual objective, preventing the invasion from reaching core Imperial worlds where billions would have died. The Vinculus Crusade concluded with the establishment of a permanent chapter keep on Vinculus Prime, a harsh but strategically located planet near the edge of the Ghoul Stars. This installation, larger and more heavily fortified than the temporary bases constructed earlier in the campaign, served multiple purposes. It functioned as a monitoring station, watching for future Orc activity that might coalesce into another major threat. It provided a recruitment center, drawing aspirants from the hardy frontier worlds whose populations were tested constantly by a hostile environment. And it stood as a permanent declaration of imperial authority in a region that had known only darkness and alien dominion for millennia. The keep's construction represented a significant investment of resources, indicating the chapter's long-term commitment to the region. Unlike the temporary fortifications that could be abandoned when strategic priorities shifted, this was a statement of permanent presence. The Black Templars would remain in the Ghoul Stars, maintaining eternal vigilance, ensuring that humanity's enemies would find no respite even in the galaxy's most distant and inhospitable reaches. These campaigns, Declates against Chaos Corruption, Vinculus against Greenskin Invasion, demonstrate the breadth of threats the Black Templars have faced across their long history. Each enemy required different tactics, different preparations, different sacrifices. Yet the chapter's fundamental approach remained constant. Identify the threat, commit overwhelming force to its destruction, accept whatever casualties necessary to achieve total victory, and maintain absolute faith that the emperors would prevail through the strength of their devotion and the skill of their blades. As the Imperium enters the 42nd millennium, as new threats emerge from the darkness beyond the Great Rift and ancient enemies press their advantages with renewed vigor, the Black Templars continue to wage their eternal crusade. They stand as they have always stood, faith made manifest in ceramite and steel, judgment delivered through bolter and blade, the Emperor's wrath given form through warriors who know neither fear nor doubt. Their crusade has no end, for how can faith end while believers still draw breath? How can judgment cease while the guilty still live? How can wrath be satisfied while enemies of mankind still draw the air that belongs by right to humanity? The Black Templars understand these truths in their souls, and they embrace them. They are Crusaders eternal, Templars unbroken, the Emperor's chosen warriors who shall know no peace until all his enemies lie dead at his feet or the last Black Templar falls in his service. And even then, they believe, their spirits will fight on in realms beyond mortal comprehension, joining the Emperor's eternal host, waging war in dimensions where faith and fury transcend the limitations of flesh. For the Black Templars, death is not an ending but a transition, a change in the nature of their service, but never a cessation of it. This is their purpose. This is their faith. This is the eternal crusade that Sigismund began 10,000 years ago, and that will continue until the stars themselves burn out and reality itself comes to its final end. No pity, no remorse, no fear, only faith, fury, and the absolute certainty that in serving the Emperor unto death and beyond, I have found the only purpose that truly matters. The galaxy burns, the Imperium bleeds. Humanity stands at the precipice of extinction as it has stood for 10,000 years. But as long as the Black Templars draw breath, as long as their crusade fleets surge through the void toward the next battle, as long as their warriors take their oaths and seek out the Emperor's enemies with righteous wrath, humanity endures. Not merely survives, but endures with purpose, with dignity, with the absolute conviction that faith and steel wielded together can overcome any darkness. This is the legacy of Sigismund. This is the eternal crusade of the Black Templars, and it shall never end.